A woman stands alone on a mountain road at midnight, rain hammering down, her luxury car wrapped around a guardrail, and the men in the black SUV pulling up behind her are not there to help. One decision, one stranger with a pickup truck and nothing to lose. That's all that stands between Sophia Bennett, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, and the people inside her own company who want her dead. But what no one saw coming, not the conspirators, not Sophia herself, was that the most dangerous man in this story wasn't the one with money or power. He was a broke single father working a double shift, driving home in the rain, who simply could not make himself keep going. If this story already has you, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go. The rain had been falling for 3 hours by the time Liam Walker finally clocked out. It wasn't the kind of rain that made people poetic. No soft patter on windowsills, no romantic atmosphere. It was the kind that found every gap in your collar, that soaked through the seams of a jacket that cost $42 6 years ago and had never been properly waterproof since. The parking lot behind Kellerman's Auto and Repair sat in a shallow valley off Route 9, and by 10:15 at night, it had become a shallow lake. Liam crossed it in 3 long strides, hit the door of his truck with his shoulder because the handle stuck in the cold, and dropped into the driver's seat with the particular exhaustion of a man who had been running on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine coffee since 6 that morning. He sat for a second, just a second, his hands on the wheel, his forehead almost touching it. He'd started the day at the garage, 6 to 2, changing oil and doing a brake job on a minivan whose owner had complained about the price twice and tipped nothing. Then he'd crossed town to his second shift at the fulfillment warehouse off Industrial Parkway, where he'd spent 6 hours pulling orders off shelves and loading them onto pallets under fluorescent lights that flickered on the south end and gave him a headache by hour 3. The warehouse supervisor, a guy named Paulson, who wore his lanyard like it was a medal, had docked him 15 minutes because he'd taken too long in the bathroom. Liam hadn't argued. He never argued anymore about small things. He'd learned the hard way which hills were worth dying on, and a 15-minute dock wasn't one of them. He started the truck. The heater groaned to life and blew cold air for 30 seconds before it got warm, which was its way of reminding him that the blower motor was going. He'd been putting off fixing it because fixing it on your own truck, even when you're a mechanic, felt like the cobbler's children with no shoes. You spent all day fixing other people's problems, and when you got home you looked at your own problems and you thought, tomorrow. He pulled out of the lot and headed toward Mountain Route 7, because 7 was faster than the highway at this hour, even with the curves, and because he wanted to get home. He wanted to get home because Marisol was waiting, and the thought of Marisol, 6 years old, gap-toothed, currently obsessed with dinosaurs, and also with a cartoon about a girl who builds robots, was the only thing that had been pulling him forward since 2 o'clock that afternoon when everything started to feel like drowning. His neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, had the night shift at the hospital and had agreed to stay with Mari until 10:30. It was 10:17 now. He'd make it. He was thinking about whether they had enough cereal for tomorrow morning. He was almost certain they did not, when his headlights caught the shape on the road ahead. He saw the guardrail first. The section of it that had been caved in, the metal bent outward in a wide crumple that meant something heavy had hit it hard. Then he saw the car. A silver Porsche Cayenne, current model year from the shape of it, nose pressed against the hillside rock face on the right, rear end partially blocking the lane. Steam or smoke rising from under the hood, he couldn't tell which in the rain. No hazard lights. He pulled over 20 yards back and left his own hazards on, got out into the rain. The road was dark. This stretch of Route 7 didn't have streetlights, and he moved with his phone out, flashlight on, sweeping the beam as he approached the car. He was thinking about the protocol. Check for injury, call 911, set up warning if he had flares. He had 1 flare left in the truck bed under the tarp. He'd used the other 2 6 months ago on the Brennan kid's busted axle on the interstate. He reached the passenger side of the Porsche and shone his light through the window. She was in the driver's seat, alive, conscious, not visibly bleeding. Late 20s or early 30s, dark hair plastered wet against her face, both hands braced on the steering wheel like she was still in the moment of impact. She flinched at the light and turned toward him, and even through the rain-streaked glass he could see the expression on her face, Not the dazed, shocked look of someone who'd lost control on a wet curve. Her eyes were sharp, alert. And she was afraid, but it wasn't the kind of fear that comes from hitting a guardrail. It was a different kind, the kind that's about something that hasn't happened yet. He knocked on the glass. "Hey, you okay?" She stared at him. I'm not going to hurt you." He held up his phone, kept his voice level. "I can call 911. You hurt anywhere?" She looked at him for another 2 seconds like she was doing some kind of calculation, and then she rolled the window down an inch, just an inch. "Do you have a car?" she said. "Yeah, right back there with the hazards." "I need you to drive me away from here." Her voice was measured, careful, the words precise in a way that wasn't panic. "Right now, before you call anyone." "Ma'am, if you're injured." "I'm not injured." She looked in the rearview mirror, then looked at him. "Please. I'll explain everything, I promise I will, but I need you to drive me away from this road right now. There are people coming." Liam stood in the rain and looked at her for a moment. He was not a person who generally made fast decisions based on gut feeling, or maybe more accurately, he'd had enough bad things happen to him that he'd gotten careful. He'd learned that things that looked straightforward often weren't, and things that felt urgent often turned out to be someone else's problem, dressed up as an emergency. But she wasn't hysterical. She wasn't performing. Her voice had the quality of someone who was frightened and disciplined about it at the same time. And the fear itself struck him as real in a way that was hard to fake at 10:17 on a dark mountain road with no one watching. He said, "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then come on." She was out of the car in 10 seconds. She grabbed a leather bag from the passenger seat, the kind that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and she moved fast, no wobbling, no hesitation. He noticed she was wearing dress pants and low heels and a blazer that was already soaked through, and she didn't complain about any of it. They got into his truck. He pulled back onto the road and kept his speed steady, not fast enough to fishtail on the wet curves, not slow enough to be passed. She sat in the passenger seat with her bag in her lap, her hands on top of it, watching the side mirror. Neither of them said anything for about 90 seconds. Then, from behind them on the road, headlights appeared. One set, moving faster than the conditions warranted. The woman, he didn't know her name yet, went very still. Liam watched the mirror. The lights were gaining, coming fast around the last curve. "That them?" he asked. "I don't know for certain." A pause. "Probably." He thought about that for a second. Then he turned off his hazards, killed his running lights for exactly 4 seconds while he made the next curve, and when he came out of it, he was on a stretch he knew well. He'd driven this road 1,000 times, and there was a fire road on the left, unmarked, used mostly by forestry vehicles in the summer. He'd pulled off on it once before, 3 years ago, when Mari had fallen asleep in the back seat, and he hadn't been ready to go home yet. Hadn't been ready to go inside the house that still smelled like Claire. He turned onto it without signaling, killed the headlights. Pulled 50 yards down into the dark under the trees. The SUV came around the curve on the road. He could see the lights through the trees, slowed at the spot where his truck had been visible, and kept going, moving fast. Gone in 30 seconds. Liam sat in the dark in his truck in the rain with a woman he'd never met and listened to the rain on the roof. "Okay," he said. "Now you tell me what that was." Well, her name was Sophia Bennett. He found that out about 4 minutes later when he was back on Route 7 heading down off the mountain toward town. She told him her name the way some people state a fact they're not sure will mean anything, flatly, without emphasis, watching his face. It didn't mean anything to him. He was a mechanic and warehouse worker. He did not read the business press. She seemed, he thought, slightly relieved by that. What she told him, in pieces, over the next 15 minutes, was this. She was the CEO of a technology company called Nexus Systems, based out of the city. The company had a valuation she named and he didn't fully process. It was just a number with a lot of zeros. She'd been driving back from a meeting at a private residence in the hills, alone, because the meeting was the kind that couldn't have a driver waiting outside. On the way down the mountain, someone had forced her off the road. Not run her off accidentally, forced her, deliberately. A black vehicle that had come up fast from behind sideswiped her twice until she hit the guardrail. She'd stayed in the car because getting out on a dark road with whoever was in that vehicle didn't seem like the better option. She'd been sitting there for maybe 8 minutes before Liam's headlights appeared. He listened to all of this without speaking. When she finished, the silence stretched. "You call the police?" he asked. "Not yet." "Why not?" She hesitated. Not like she was hiding something, more like she was deciding how much of a complicated answer to give him. "Because I don't know yet who I can trust inside the system. And because until I understand what I'm dealing with, calling the police could create complications I can't manage from the side of a mountain road." Liam turned that over in his mind. He had a general distrust of complicated answers, but he also had enough experience with situations that looked simple from the outside and weren't to know that complicated answers were sometimes just true. "Is there somewhere I can drop you?" he asked. "Hotel? Friend's place?" "I can't go anywhere they'd expect." She paused. "I know it sounds like a movie," he said, "but okay." She looked at him sideways. Something in her expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but the potential of one. He thought about it for another half-mile. Then he said, "I've got a house. It's not much. My daughter's there. She's 6. She's asleep. You can stay tonight, get your bearings, make whatever calls you need to make." He looked at her. "I'm not offering because I want anything. I'm offering because it's raining and you don't have anywhere to go." Sophia Bennett studied him the way he imagined she studied spreadsheets or whatever CEOs studied. Like she was reading for inconsistencies. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he agreed. "You have no reason to trust me either." Also true. "So why?" "Because my daughter's going to be up at 6:30 wanting dinosaur pancakes, and I'd like to get home before she wakes up, and I've been making this decision for the last 3 miles. He looked at the road. "So yes or no?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." Sir. His house was a rental on Cotter Street, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that had been updated sometime in the late 90s and hadn't changed much since, a living room where one of the outlet covers was cracked, and he'd taped a piece of cardboard over it, meaning to replace it for about 4 months now. The furniture was mismatched. A couch from a thrift store, an armchair that had been his mother's, a coffee table with a ring stain on it that predated him by at least a decade. Mrs. Calloway met him at the door with her coat already on, gave Sophia a look that was part surprise and part something harder to name, accepted Liam's explanation of car trouble on 7, she needed a place to dry off, with the careful neutrality of a woman who had raised 4 children and knew when not to ask questions, and left. Liam showed Sophia where the bathroom was, gave her a towel, found a pair of sweatpants and a long-sleeve shirt that had been Claire's. They'd been in the back of the closet for 3 years, and he'd taken them out twice and put them back, and left them outside the bathroom door without saying what they were. He went to the kitchen and made coffee because it was the only thing he could think to do. He was standing at the counter waiting for it to brew when he heard Marisol's door open down the hall, small feet on the floor. Then she appeared in the kitchen doorway in her dinosaur pajamas, eyes half open, a stuffed triceratops tucked under one arm. "Daddy." It wasn't a question, just a locating of him. "Hey, Bug, go back to bed." "I heard the door." "I know, I'm home. Go back to bed." She looked at him with the particular suspicion of a 6-year-old who is satisfied but doesn't want to admit it, then turned and padded back down the hall. He listened to her door close. Sophia came into the kitchen a few minutes later wearing the sweatpants and shirt, her hair toweled but still damp, her blazer and dress pants folded over her arm. She looked, he thought, approximately 300% less intimidating than she had in the wet blazer, which was probably why she stood slightly differently. A fraction less composed, a fraction more uncertain. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please." He poured 2 mugs. She sat at the kitchen table. He sat across from her. For a while they just drank coffee. "Whose clothes are these?" she asked finally. Not demanding, careful. "My wife's." A beat. "I'm sorry." 4 years ago. He wrapped his hands around the mug. Brain aneurysm. She was 28. Sophia didn't say anything. Most people said something. "Sick on, that's terrible," or "I can't imagine," or the worst one, "she's in a better place now." And all of it had always felt like people putting on protective gear against something they didn't want to think about. Sophia just sat with it. He noticed that. "What's your daughter's name?" she asked. "Marisol. Mari." "How old?" "6. She's in first grade. She wants to be a paleontologist." He paused. "Or a garbage truck driver. She hasn't fully decided." The corner of Sophia's mouth moved. "Both are respectable careers." "That's what I told her." He refilled both their mugs. Outside, the rain was still going, lighter now. The clock on the microwave read 11:08. "Tell me the rest of it," he said. "The actual story." She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You sure you want it tonight?" "I'm not going to sleep for a while anyway." So she told him. Nexus Systems had started as Sophia's company. Her idea, her code, her funding that she'd assembled from 3 angel investors and a credit card she'd maxed out twice. She'd built it from a shared workspace in her apartment to a company with 800 employees over 7 years. And somewhere in the last 18 months, while she'd been focused on a major product launch, something had gone wrong beneath the surface. 3 of her senior executives, her CFO, her head of corporate strategy, and a board member named Gerard Hollis, who had been one of her first investors, had been quietly moving money. Not obviously, not in ways that tripped the standard audits, but moved. Redirected through subsidiary accounts, classified under categories that were technically legitimate but weren't what they appeared to be. Sophia had found the first thread 6 weeks ago, pulled on it, and found it connected to other threads. She estimated the total at somewhere between $20 and $40 million, and growing. Worse, the 3 of them had spent the last 4 weeks constructing a narrative that pointed at her. Emails that appeared to show her authorizing transfers, meeting records that had been selectively edited, a paper trail designed to make it look, to any external investigator, like Sophia Bennett had been running the fraud herself and using her lieutenants as unwitting intermediaries. The meeting in the hills tonight had been with a former forensic accountant, someone she'd worked with years ago, completely outside the company, someone she trusted absolutely. He'd confirmed what she'd found and given her 3 additional pieces of evidence she hadn't had. She'd been on her way back with that information when the black SUV came up behind her on the road. When she finished, Liam sat quietly for a moment. "They know you found what they were doing," he said. "Yes, and they tried to kill you for it." She didn't flinch at the word. "I think the intent was to create an accident, something that could be ruled as driver error on a wet mountain road." She paused. "But yes." He thought about the SUV, the way it had slowed at the spot where his truck had been and then kept going. They hadn't found her. As far as they knew, she was still on that mountain road. "How long before they figure out you got away?" "They probably already know the car wasn't there when emergency services arrived, which means they know someone picked me up, which means—" She stopped. "They'll look at traffic cameras. There aren't many on Route 7, but there are some." "My truck's on camera at the turn-off Industrial Parkway every night," he said. "I take the same route home." She nodded. "It might take them a day, maybe 2 if they're not as organized as I think they are." Liam looked at his coffee mug. Then, at the calendar on the kitchen wall, Mari's dentist appointment circled in red marker next week, a reminder to schedule a parent-teacher conference, a note in his own handwriting that said, "Call re-shift change" that he hadn't done yet. "Okay," he said. She looked at him. "Okay, what?" "Okay, you can stay until you've got a plan, a real one." He stood up, took his mug to the sink. "Guest rules. Mari wakes up at 6:30. She'll want to know who you are. Don't lie to her. She'll know and she'll be offended. You can tell her you're a friend who had car trouble, which is technically true." He turned around. "There's a lock on the bathroom door. The guest room is the office with the pull-out couch. It's not great, but it doesn't squeak. And if you need anything in the night, I'm the first door on the left, but knock because I sleep light and I'll wake up swinging." Sophia stared at him. "What?" he said. She seemed to be choosing a word carefully. Most people, when they hear what I just told you, they want to go in the other direction. "Yeah, well?" He dried his hands on the dish towel. "Most people don't have a military background and nothing to insure." He saw her register that and file it. "Get some sleep," he said. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." He was up at 5:45 before Mari, which was how he liked it. He made actual breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, because Sophia was there, and he found he couldn't just eat cereal standing over the sink the way he usually did with a guest in the house. He heard Marisol's door at 6:28. She came into the kitchen already talking. "Daddy, my triceratops horn came off again." She stopped dead when she saw Sophia at the kitchen table, both hands around a mug of coffee, dressed in the sweatpants and shirt that had been Claire's. Mari assessed her with the thoroughness that only children and experienced interrogators can manage. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm Sophia." She didn't add anything, didn't explain, just said her name. Mari looked at her father. "Why is she here?" "She had car trouble last night. She stayed over." "In the office?" "In the office." Mari seemed to file this under acceptable and turned her triceratops towards Sophia. "His horn broke. It does that." "I see that," Sophia said. "Can I look?" Mari crossed to the table and handed over the triceratops with the horn in a separate piece. Sophia examined the break. "It's a clean break," she said. "You have super glue." "Under the sink," Liam said. What happened next was not something he would have predicted. Sophia Bennett, CEO, billion-dollar company, forensic accountant contacts, enemies powerful enough to run a car off a mountain road, spent 12 minutes at his kitchen table fixing a stuffed triceratops's horn with super glue, while Marisol explained the dietary habits of ceratopsian dinosaurs in exhaustive detail. Liam stood at the stove and made eggs, and tried not to look at either of them too much. The next 3 days were strange in a way that was hard to categorize. Sophia worked. She had her phone. It had survived the crash, and her laptop was in her bag, and she sat up at the kitchen table each morning with coffee and the focused, contained quality of someone who had learned to function inside chaos. She made calls in a low voice in the office with the door closed. She typed. She took notes on a yellow legal pad that she kept face down when she wasn't writing on it. Liam went to work both shifts on day 2 and left her with his spare key and a note that said, "Don't answer the door. Mari's at school till 3:15. Mrs. Calloway has the number if you need anything, but I'd say call me first." She texted him at 9 a.m. "I found something, not good, tell you tonight." He texted back, "Okay," and went back under a Civic with a clutch problem. She texted again at 2:15. "Your neighbor brought soup?" He replied, "Yeah, she does that. Take it." 3 minutes later, she asked me 4 questions about my intentions. He almost smiled at that under the car. He texted, "She does that too." That evening, she showed him what she'd found. She'd been working her way through a secondary set of financial records that her forensic accountant contact had sent over, and what she'd found was worse than the original picture. The 20 to 40 million estimate was wrong. It was closer to 63, and the timeline went back further than she'd thought. Not 18 months, but nearly 3 years. Gerard Hollis, the board member, hadn't just been a passive participant. He'd been the architect. The CFO and head of strategy had been following his direction, and they'd used that time to build something that would be almost impossible to untangle without the specific documents she had. "The shareholders' meeting is in 12 days, she said. "What happens at the shareholders' meeting?" "Hollis has been building toward a vote of no confidence." She spread the documents across the kitchen table. "He has enough support to force one, and with the trail they've built pointing at me, the board will have no choice but to suspend me pending investigation. Once I'm suspended, I lose access to everything: records, communications, legal counsel approved by the company. And by the time the investigation is complete, whatever they've left of the company won't be worth saving." Liam studied the papers. He wasn't a financial expert, not even close, but he could read a number and follow a logic. And the logic here was clear enough. A long and patient plan, the kind that required real patience and real contempt for everyone around you. "You have enough to counter it?" he asked. "I have enough to destroy them," she said, and there was no satisfaction in her voice when she said it, just a kind of flat certainty. "If I can get it in front of the right people before the meeting." Who are the right people? 3 board members who are genuinely independent, and the lead investigator at the SEC who I've dealt with before. She's clean. I know that for certain. He nodded slowly. "So what's stopping you?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know who inside the company is working with Hollis." My head of legal. I need him to file an emergency injunction, but if he's compromised, the moment I contact him, I might as well have called Hollis directly. She tapped the legal pad. I've been going through everyone in the executive structure trying to narrow it down. Anyone you're certain about? She thought. My PA, Dana Chen. She's been with me since year 2. She's not involved. A pause. Marcus Webb, head of operations. I'd stake significant money on him. Those 2 are your team, Liam said. That's where you start. She looked at him. You make it sound simple? It's not. But you've been sitting here for 2 days trying to figure out who isn't on your side. Start with who is. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the papers. You're right, she said, in the tone of someone who didn't say that very often. On the 3rd day, things shifted. Liam got home from the garage at 2:30. They'd closed early because of a burst pipe and found a black SUV parked on the street 3 houses down from his. It might have been nothing. People parked on Cotter Street all the time, but the SUV hadn't been there when he'd left that morning, and the windows were tinted past the legal limit for this state, and it was backed into the spot in a way that had the nose pointed at his house. He didn't stop. Drove past, went around the block, called Mrs. Calloway from the side street. Is Mari home? She got off the bus 20 minutes ago. She's here watching her show. Can you keep her there? Don't bring her home until I call you. Liam, please, Mrs. C. I'll explain later. He parked 2 streets over and came back on foot through the alley. Came in through the back, through the gate he usually kept locked, but hadn't that morning. Knocked twice on the back door with the specific knock he'd started doing when Sophia had been there a day. Because he'd told her, don't open the back door for anything you don't expect. She opened it. He came inside fast, didn't turn on any lights. Black SUV, 3 houses down, he said. Backed in. She absorbed that without visible panic. Windows tinted? Yes. She picked up her phone, typed something, waited. Then, plate comes back registered to a leasing company in Stamford, which is one of Hollis's firms. You can just know that? I have resources. She put the phone down. They found us. Yeah. I need to move. I can go to... You're not going anywhere right now, he said. If they're watching the front, they might have the back too. Give it an hour. I'll check. He was in the kitchen, looking out through the window at the alley, when his phone buzzed. Number he didn't recognize. He answered. Mr. Walker. The voice on the other end was male, unhurried, with the particular quality of someone who was accustomed to getting what he asked for. My name isn't important. I think you've gotten yourself tangled up in something that has nothing to do with you. Liam's jaw tightened. He kept his voice neutral. Is that right? The woman's staying with you. She's not who she's presented herself as. She's being investigated for serious financial crimes. You've been housing a fugitive, which could create significant problems for you. A pause. You're a single father, Mr. Walker. You have a daughter. You have 2 jobs. You don't need this kind of problem. What do you want? Tell us where you are. Let us come in and speak with Ms. Bennett. We're not interested in you. You're an innocent party. This can all be over very cleanly. Liam looked at Sophia, who was watching him from across the kitchen. He hadn't put the call on speaker, but she could read enough from his expression. I appreciate the call, Liam said. I'll give it some thought. He hung up. They know my name, he said. I know. She was very still. Liam, don't. He set the phone on the counter. Don't apologize, just think. She thought. Then she said, There's a hotel off the I-95 interchange, cash only, older property. I stayed there once during a security audit when we needed to go dark for a weekend. They don't ask for ID if you come in after midnight. We can't go out the front. The alley? I need to check it first. He moved through the house to Mari's room because even though Mari wasn't here, he wanted to look at it. The dinosaur posters and the drawings she'd made of her family that included a dog they didn't have, the pile of books she couldn't read yet but arranged on her shelf by color. He stood there for about 5 seconds. Then he went to check the alley. The alley was clear. They left at 4:15, on foot, Liam's truck staying in the driveway as a misdirect. He carried his phone and his keys in a canvas bag with the documents Sophia had been compiling, because losing those was not an option. She carried her bag. They went 4 blocks east before he called a rideshare from a number he borrowed from a kid at the convenience store. Not his own phone, not Sophia's, and they sat in the back of a Camry driven by a man named David, who asked them no questions and dropped them at the hotel 20 minutes later. The room had 2 queen beds, a heater that worked, and a bathroom whose sink faucet ran slightly warm on the cold setting, which was fine. There were worse things. Sophia sat on the edge of one bed with the legal pad and her laptop and didn't say much. Liam sat in the chair by the window and called Mrs. Calloway and told her he'd explain everything tomorrow, that Mari could sleep over if it was all right, that he was sorry, and he owed her significantly. "You don't owe me a thing," Mrs. Calloway said, in a tone that meant he owed her a lot, but she wasn't going to discuss it. He sat in the chair after he hung up and watched the rain, which had started again, lighter now, more of a mist than a real rain. Sophia said, from the bed, "You're angry?" "A little. At me. At the situation." He looked at her. "And maybe a little at you, but mostly at the situation." She nodded. No defensiveness, no apology performance, just an acknowledgement. "My daughter's sleeping at the neighbor's house because somebody ran you off a mountain road," he said. Yeah, I'm a little angry." "You could still walk away from this," she said. "I've been thinking about that. You could go back, get Marisol, just go somewhere for a week or 2 until it's over one way or another. And if it goes the other way?" "What do you mean?" "If you lose, if they win, then what?" She was quiet. "Then they know my name and my face and my address," he said. "There's no walking away from that anymore." She looked at her hands on the laptop. "I'm sorry, you're right, I shouldn't have—" "You didn't do anything wrong," he said, surprising himself slightly with the honesty of it. "You were on a mountain road in the rain, and I stopped. That's it." He exhaled. "I just needed to say it. The anger part. Now it's said." She looked up at him. "Thank you," she said. "Not for the hotel room or the food or the help with the documents. Just thank you for all of it." He understood that. "Get some sleep," he said. "You've got calls to make tomorrow." He turned back to the window. The mist was settling on the parking lot lights, turning them into soft halos. 3 days ago, he'd been worrying about whether they had enough cereal. He sat with that for a while. He didn't have a plan yet. He had a woman in the room behind him with $63 million worth of stolen money and a paper trail, and 12 days before a meeting that could end her company. And he had a daughter at his neighbor's house wearing dinosaur pajamas. And somewhere out there was a man named Hollis, who had called him a bystander and expected him to fold. Liam Walker had made the mistake, in his life, of underestimating exactly one person. That person had been himself. He wasn't going to make the same mistake about Hollis. He'd figure out the plan in the morning. He made the calls in the morning, not Sophia, Liam. While she was in the bathroom with the shower running and the fan going, he sat in the chair by the window with the yellow legal pad on his knee and went through the documents she'd compiled the night before. He wasn't a lawyer or an accountant. He was a man who had spent 6 years fixing broken things and who understood, at a mechanical level, that the same principle applied to almost everything. Find the part that's failed, understand why it failed, and work backward from there until you know what has to be replaced. What had failed here was trust. And the reason it had failed was because Gerard Hollis had understood, 3 years ago, that trust was the only thing standing between him and $63 million. Sophia came out of the bathroom with her hair damp and the hotel's thin robe over her shoulders and found him reading. "You were up early," she said. "Didn't really sleep." He held up the legal pad. "I want to go over the web thing again. You said you'd stake significant money on him." "Marcus?" "Yes." "Why?" She sat on the edge of the bed, thought about it genuinely, which he appreciated. She didn't just reassert it, she actually interrogated her own certainty. He pushed back against Hollis publicly in the Q3 review meeting 6 months ago. Hollis wanted to restructure the operations division in a way that would have created a reporting gap. Marcus flagged it, got it reversed, in front of the whole executive team. She paused. If he were working with Hollis, That's an extraordinarily risky thing to do for theater. Unless it was exactly that, theater, making himself look independent. She looked at him steadily. You're right to push on it, but I've known Marcus for 4 years. There's a difference between... She stopped, started again. There's a kind of competence that genuine people have that's different from the competence of people who are performing. It's hard to articulate. No, I get it, he said. I know the difference. I just needed to hear you say you'd thought it through. She pulled her hair back with a band from her wrist. You do that. Do what? Test whether someone's just saying something or whether they actually know it. She wasn't critical about it, just observational. You did it to me that first night in the truck. The guardrail question. He hadn't thought of it as a test. He'd just asked what felt like the natural next question, but she wasn't wrong that he was reading her when she answered it. Occupational habit, he said. From the military? From being a single parent. He set the legal pad down. When your kid asks you something, you can always tell if you're reciting or if you actually know the answer. They can tell too. You learn to know the difference in yourself. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Outside, a truck rumbled through the parking lot and the heater clicked and pushed warm air through the vent near the floor. Call Marcus, he said, not on your regular phone. Get a burner. There's a gas station 2 blocks east. I passed it when we came in. Prepaid cards, cash. He won't recognize an unknown number. Then text him something only the two of you would know, something from that Q3 meeting. Make him come to you. She thought about it, nodded once. I'll go get the card, he said. He pulled on his jacket and went out into the morning. The air was cold and clear after the rain, the kind of clarity that only comes after a storm when everything looks slightly sharper than it should. He walked the 2 blocks to the gas station with his hands in his pockets and his eyes moving, a habit that had never fully left him from the 18 months he'd spent in Kandahar at 23, where situational awareness was either instinct or it was a headstone. He didn't think he was being followed. He didn't see the Stamford Leasing Company SUV or any vehicle that parked and killed its engine when he stopped. He bought 2 prepaid cards, a coffee he didn't need, and a pack of gum for Marisol that he shoved in his jacket pocket without thinking about it, which made him stop for half a second in the gas station doorway. He pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Calloway. She's fine, Mrs. Calloway said before he finished saying good morning. She had oatmeal, she's watching her show, and she told me this morning that garbage trucks are actually more important than paleontology because someone has to take care of things after they're broken. I told her that was very wise. I need a couple more days, he said. I know that's Liam. Her voice was the same tone she used with her adult children when they were working up to an unnecessary apology. 2 more days. Go do what you need to do. He stood on the sidewalk outside the gas station and breathed through his nose for a moment. The coffee was hot through the paper cup. He went back to the hotel. Sophia made contact with Marcus Webb at 11:47 that morning. She'd sent him a text from the prepaid phone referencing a specific number, a line item from the Q3 review that Hollis had tried to reclassify. That would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't been in that meeting. Marcus called back in 4 minutes. Liam sat in the chair and listened to her half of the conversation. He watched her face. She started carefully, the way a person does when they're testing ice. Short sentences, measured responses, not committing to anything until she got a reading. Then something changed in her posture. Her shoulders moved slightly, released some tension she'd been carrying for days. Not all of it, but some. She talked for 22 minutes. When she hung up, she held the phone in both hands and looked at the wall. He already knew, she said. Not everything, but he'd noticed the same anomalies I found 6 weeks ago. He'd been documenting quietly, on his own, waiting until he had enough to bring to me directly. She paused. He didn't know I was already onto it. He was protecting you, Liam said. He was trying to. She set the phone down. He has 4 additional records I didn't have. One of them is a direct communication between Hollis and the CFO. Names, amounts, specific account numbers. From 14 months ago. She looked at him. That's not circumstantial. That's criminal. How soon can he get it to you? He wants to meet in person. He's worried about digital transfer. He's right to be. Hollis has an IT contractor with admin access to most of the company's cloud systems. Where? She named a coffee shop in the warehouse district, the kind of place that drew enough foot traffic to provide cover. They agreed on 2 o'clock. Liam drove. He'd called his cousin Jimmy that morning. Jimmy was the family member who never asked many questions and always had a vehicle to lend for reasons that were probably best left alone. And Jimmy had dropped a 10-year-old Civic at the hotel parking lot with a text that said, "Keys under the mat, don't scratch it, and nothing else." Liam appreciated that about Jimmy. The coffee shop had mismatched furniture and exposed brick and the particular atmosphere of a place that had been exactly the same for 20 years and wasn't planning to change. Marcus Webb arrived at 2:03, wearing a dark coat and the expression of a man who was carrying something heavy and had been for a while. He was 51, compact, with the kind of gray at his temples that came from stress rather than age. He shook Liam's hand when Sophia introduced them without asking who he was, which told Liam something about his character. He'd assessed quickly and decided the question could wait. They sat in the back corner, away from the windows. Marcus put a thumb drive on the table. "Everything's on there," he said. "I made 3 copies, one with my personal attorney, one with my sister in Phoenix, one with you." He pushed it toward Sophia. "The direct communication is the anchor, but there's also a set of board meeting minutes from 8 months ago that were officially recorded as a vote on expansion strategy. That vote didn't happen. I was in the room. What actually happened was a private briefing by Hollis on the reputational strategy. That's what he called it. The framing for how they'd position your removal as necessary governance." Sophia was very still. "He ran that in a board meeting. Partial board. 3 members present, all aligned with him. The independent members weren't notified of the meeting. Officially, it was a calendar conflict. They were all at a conference in Chicago, which Hollis had organized." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "I was there because I'd been invited to present on operations improvements, and I didn't realize what I was walking into until I was already in the room. I left after 20 minutes. I told Hollis I had a conflict." He paused. "He didn't try to stop me, which told me he wasn't worried about me." "He miscalculated," Liam said. Marcus looked at him properly for the first time. "Yes," he said. "He did." There was a silence. A barista called out an order at the front of the shop. The door opened and a woman in a yellow coat came in, and Liam clocked her. Just a woman in a yellow coat, nothing else, and settled back. "The shareholders' meeting," Sophia said. 11 days. "He's been counting on the fact that you wouldn't have enough time to mount a defense through official channels," Marcus said. "Emergency injunctions take time. Even with the SEC, getting an investigator up to speed and willing to intervene in an active board proceeding—" "I have a contact," Sophia said. "The SEC investigator I mentioned to you, Andrea Reyes. I've worked with her before on a compliance review. She knows the company. Can she move fast enough? I need to give her everything at once, not piece by piece." Sophia looked at the thumb drive. "This is the piece I was missing." Marcus nodded. He looked tired in the way that people look when they've been holding a secret alone for too long, and the relief of sharing it hasn't arrived yet. When you're still in the part where you're afraid of what comes next. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Stay dark," Sophia said. "Don't change your routine. Don't make any unusual contacts. Don't do anything that signals you've met with me. I need Hollis to believe he still has the timeline he planned. He'll know something's wrong when the injunction files. By then it won't matter what he knows." She picked up the thumb drive and closed her fingers around it. 10 days, Marcus. Then it's done." He nodded again, finished his coffee, stood. "One thing," he said, and looked at Liam. "Whoever you are, she made a good choice." He left. Sophia and Liam sat for a moment in the quiet of the coffee shop. "You hungry?" he asked. She blinked. "What?" "We haven't eaten since this morning. I'm hungry. You're probably hungry. There's a diner 2 blocks down." She looked at him with an expression he was beginning to recognize, the slight recalibration she did every time he responded to something serious with something practical. Like she kept expecting him to meet the weight of things with matching gravity, and kept being surprised when he didn't. "Yes," she said, "I'm hungry." The diner had good coffee and bad pie, and they ordered both. Sophia ate the pie with the focused attention of someone who hadn't really tasted food in 4 days, which was probably close to accurate. Tell me about before, Liam said. Before the company. She looked up. Why? Because you've been a CEO in a crisis for 4 days, and I have no idea what you're actually like. She considered that, ate another forkful of pie. I grew up in Westchester. My father was an engineer, my mother taught high school chemistry. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. There was always a version of the math where things could go wrong. She paused. I was good at computers the way some kids are good at math. Not because it was interesting, just because it was obvious, the logic of it. She set down the fork. I left home at 18, went to state school on a partial scholarship, built the first version of Nexus in my apartment in my junior year, dropped out senior year to run it. Your parents? My father thought I was making a mistake. My mother thought he was wrong. A small pause. She was right. He came around about 3 years in when the Series B closed. She drank her coffee. He still calls to tell me what I should have done differently on the last quarter, even now. Liam smiled slightly at that. What? She said. Nothing. Just, that's a very human detail. She studied him across the table. You do that thing where you're watching for people to be ordinary. I do, he said. It's a better baseline than the other direction. She looked at her coffee. What about you? Before? He thought about how to answer that. I grew up about 40 miles from here, outside of town. My dad worked the rail yards, my mom worked retail. I was going to go to college. I had decent grades, good enough anyway. But my second year of high school, my dad had a back injury and couldn't work, and the math changed. He shrugged. I enlisted at 18, 2 deployments. Came back, used the GI Bill for vocational training. Mechanics made more practical sense than a 4-year degree for what I owed. He turned his coffee cup. I met Claire at 24, and she was a teacher. We had Mari at 26. He stopped. Sophia waited. When she died, he said, I had a 4-year-old and a mortgage and 1 job. That was the situation. So I got a second job. He said it without performance, the way people say true things about hard periods when enough time has passed, that the shape of it is just a fact rather than a wound. Sophia didn't say anything for a moment. You never thought about selling the house? Moving somewhere cheaper? Claire picked the house, he said simply. She absorbed that, didn't press. They sat for a while after that in the comfortable silence of 2 people who had told each other something true, which is a different kind of silence than the kind you fill. He paid the check. She reached for it, and he beat her to it, and she let him, which surprised him faintly. He'd expected an argument. Next one's mine, she said. Okay. They drove back to the hotel in the early afternoon light, the Civic moving easily through light traffic, and Liam was thinking about the thumb drive and the 11 days and what needed to happen in what order when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Not the same one as before. He answered it anyway, because not answering unknown numbers when people were trying to find you was how you got ambushed by the thing you didn't see coming. Mr. Walker? A different voice this time. Female, professional, the clipped cadence of someone who was reading from a script only in the loosest sense. This is a courtesy call. You have 24 hours to return Ms. Bennett to the situation she's agreed to participate in. After that, the terms become less favorable for everyone involved. What does that mean, the terms become less favorable? It means that people who are peripherally involved sometimes become more centrally involved in ways they didn't anticipate. He kept his voice even. Is that a threat? It's information. A pause. Your daughter attends Crestview Elementary, 1st grade. She rides the number 14 bus. Liam's hand tightened on the steering wheel, just slightly. Sophia in the passenger seat looked at his face and said nothing. I heard you, he said. 24 hours, the voice said, and the call ended. He drove for about 30 seconds without speaking. Sophia didn't ask. She was watching him with the focused attention of someone who had learned that waiting was often better than prompting. They know where Mari goes to school, he said. The air in the car changed. Liam, I need to think for a minute. He pulled into a strip mall parking lot and stopped the car, sat with his hands on the wheel and his eyes forward. He had spent significant energy in the last 4 days making sure his anger didn't make his decisions for him. He'd been careful. He'd asked the right questions and waited for the right answers. And he'd moved Sophia out of the house and gotten Mari to safety before anything happened. And he'd done all of it with the kind of controlled patience that he'd learned was the difference between good outcomes and disasters. The call had been designed to break that. He knew that. Using Mari's name, her school, the bus number, it was a precision instrument aimed at exactly the part of him that was not controlled and not patient. Every parent had that part. The part that had no strategy and no containment. He was aware of it. He sat with it. "They won't touch her," Sophia said quietly. "You don't know that." "No, I don't." She met his eyes when he turned to look at her. "But they need leverage. She's only leverage if she's not hurt. The moment anything happens to a 6-year-old, the entire story changes. They lose the ability to frame me, they lose the board's sympathy, they lose everything they've spent 3 years building." She paused. "They're afraid, Liam. This call is what afraid sounds like when it's wearing a suit." He held her gaze. She wasn't saying it to comfort him. She was saying it because she'd thought it through, which was how she said most things. "I'm moving Mari today," he said. "My sister's in Albany. She doesn't know anything about this. She's got no connection to me professionally, and Hollis has no reason to know she exists." "Okay. I'll tell her it's a family thing. She won't push." He pulled out his phone. "I need you to make the SEC call today, not tomorrow. Today." "I was already planning today, Sophia." He looked at her directly. "Whatever timeline you had, cut it in half." She didn't argue. He called his sister Rachel while Sophia pulled out the prepaid phone. Rachel answered on the second ring, and he told her he needed a favor, the kind he didn't explain over the phone, and could she take Mari for maybe a week starting today. Rachel said yes. She said it with the particular quickness of a sibling who has learned to read certain tones, and asked only if everyone was physically safe. And he said yes, and she said she'd get a room ready. He texted Mrs. Calloway. "Rachel is coming to pick up Mari this afternoon. She's expecting her. I'll explain everything soon. I'm sorry to keep asking." Mrs. Calloway texted back. "She's already packed. She told me she's going on a dinosaur expedition." He put the phone down. The strip mall parking lot was ordinary and quiet around them. A nail salon, a dry cleaner, a Chinese takeout place with a handwritten special on the door. The whole world going about its Tuesday like the ground wasn't shifting under anyone. "Okay," he said. He put the car in drive. "Let's go." Sophia made the call to Andrea Reyes at the SEC from the hotel room at 4 in the afternoon, while Liam sat by the window and listened and watched the parking lot through the gap in the curtains. He didn't know what he was watching for, exactly. The Stamford SUV again, maybe. Or the particular stillness of a parked vehicle where the driver wasn't really parked, but waiting. He'd learned in Kandahar that the difference between a roadside and a roadside bomb was often just the quality of attention you brought to an ordinary-looking moment. The call lasted 40 minutes. When Sophia hung up, she sat on the bed and pressed her hands flat against the bedspread. "She'll review everything tonight," she said. "If the documentation holds, and it will, she can file for emergency intervention before the shareholders' meeting. She has a contact on the exchange who can freeze trading and board actions pending investigation." "How confident are you?" "About the evidence? Completely." She looked at her hands. "About the speed? 70%. What's the 30%? Bureaucratic friction." She said it without bitterness, just as a variable that existed in the world. Emergency processes still have processes. People who are technically empowered to move fast sometimes don't, for reasons that have nothing to do with the facts in front of them. "Then we plan for the 30%, he said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment, then, "How old were you when you were deployed?" The shift in topic caught him slightly. 20, first deployment, 22 for the second. "Were you scared?" He thought about it honestly. "The first time, yes. All the way through. I got decent at not showing it, which isn't the same as not feeling it." He paused. "Second time I was less scared, but I'd seen more, which has its own version of difficulty." "How did you—" She stopped. "Started differently." "What got you through it?" He looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Routine. Stupid, boring routine. You get up, You do the thing in front of you, you don't think about the bigger shape of it unless you have to. The times I got into trouble were the times I started thinking too far ahead. She nodded. He thought she was filing it for herself, applying it. We should eat, he said. You say that a lot. Because it's always true. He stood. There's a Thai place a block over. I looked it up this morning. You looked up the Thai place before you knew any of this was going to happen today? Force of habit. I always scope the food options in a new area. She looked at him with an expression that was somewhere between exasperated and something warmer that she didn't have a full name for yet. Okay, she said. Thai place. They walked the block in the early evening, when the sky was the gray-blue of 4:30 in November and the streetlights were coming on. They walked close enough together that their shoulders occasionally brushed. Neither of them moved away. The Thai place was small and warm and smelled like lemongrass and something frying in a wok. And the woman who seated them spoke to them in the tone of someone who ran her restaurant like she ran her life, with complete authority and no particular interest in your opinion about it. They ordered without looking at the menu, not because they knew it, but because it was that kind of place where you pointed at what smelled right and trusted the outcome. They ate without talking much. There was a version of that silence that would have been strained, two people in crisis in a small room, but it wasn't that version. It was the version that comes after you've said the true things and you're both still there. Sophia's phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from Dana Chen, her PA. Hollis called a pre-meeting executive briefing for Thursday. Mandatory attendance. He's circulating a governance document. People are nervous. She showed it to Liam. He read it. He's accelerating. Yes. She put the phone face down on the table. He got nervous when they couldn't find me. He's trying to close this before the shareholders meeting instead of at it. Does that change the SEC timeline? I'll push on Andrea again tomorrow morning. She picked up her chopsticks. And I need Dana in the room on Thursday to document what he says. Is Dana safe doing that? She's the one who offered. He nodded. He thought about the woman in the yellow coat in the coffee shop that afternoon, how he'd clocked her and then let her go. You could build a prison out of caution. You had to know when to extend trust. She sounds steady, he said. She's the steadiest person I know. Sophia paused. Which is saying something. He thought she might be including him in that comparison and wasn't sure what to do with it. They walked back to the hotel after dinner. The cold had dropped in the hour they'd been eating, and their breath clouded in the air, and the streetlights were fully up now, bright against the dark. At the door of the hotel room, she stopped. I want to say something, she said, and I want to say it once and not make a thing of it. He waited. I've handled crises before. Funding crises, legal challenges, a data breach 2 years ago that I don't enjoy thinking about. I've handled them alone because that was the structure of my life. I was the one people turned to, so I didn't have someone to turn to myself. She looked at him steadily. I'm not used to having backup, and She stopped, found the word. I'm grateful. In a way I don't think I have good language for. Liam looked at her. There were about 4 responses available to him, and most of them were wrong. Too much, too little, deflective, excessive. He said, You'd have figured it out anyway. She blinked. What? Even without me. You were already working the problem when I found you. You had the forensic accountant. You had the legal pad. You had the plan. He shrugged. I just gave you a kitchen table. She held his gaze for a moment. A kitchen table, she repeated. And the eggs. Don't forget the eggs. She laughed. Just briefly. A real one, caught off guard. The kind that changed the whole shape of her face. Then it was gone, and she was herself again, but slightly different, like something had shifted a few degrees and settled somewhere new. Good night, Liam, she said. Good night. He sat in the chair by the window for a long time after she was asleep, watching the parking lot. The cold pressed against the glass. Somewhere across town, his daughter was sleeping at his neighbor's house with a triceratops under her arm, and tomorrow Rachel would drive down from Albany and take her somewhere safe. He thought about what came next. 11 days had become 10. The Thursday briefing was 2 days away. Hollis was moving. He thought about the voice on the phone, the bus number, the school. The anger was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. But it was a different shape now, cleaner, more useful. He picked up the yellow legal pad and turned to a fresh page and started writing down everything he knew, in the order it happened and in the order it mattered, which were not the same order. He'd been in situations before where the distance between those two orderings was the difference between the outcome you wanted and the one you couldn't walk back from. He wrote for an hour. When he was done, he looked at what he had, and he thought, this is enough to win. If we do everything right, this is enough. He also knew that doing everything right was the hardest part. He set the pad down and closed his eyes in the chair and didn't sleep exactly, but rested, which, when you were a person who never fully stopped watching, was close enough. Rachel picked up Marisol on Wednesday morning, and Liam stood in Mrs. Calloway's driveway and watched his daughter climb into his sister's back seat with the Triceratops under one arm and a backpack shaped like a stegosaurus on her back. And the last thing Mari said before the door closed was, "Daddy, Aunt Rachel said there's a natural history museum in Albany. Can we go?" "Absolutely," he said. "Can you come?" "Not this trip, next time." She studied him with those eyes that had always been too perceptive for her age, Claire's eyes, the same quality of attention. And then she said, "Okay," in the tone she used when she was accepting something she didn't fully like. And the door closed, and Rachel pulled out of the driveway. Liam stood on the sidewalk until the car turned the corner. Mrs. Calloway appeared beside him with a mug of coffee she hadn't asked if he wanted. "She'll be fine," she said. "I know." "You don't look like you know." "I know it up here." He touched his temple. "It takes a while to get down to the rest of me." Mrs. Calloway handed him the coffee and went inside without another word, which was one of the reasons he'd always liked her. He drank the coffee on the sidewalk and then walked back to where Jimmy's Civic was parked and drove to the hotel. Sophia was already at the table with the laptop open when he came in. She had the focused, contained look she got when she was 3 steps into something and didn't want to lose the thread. "Andrea Reyes called," she said without looking up. "Early. 6:15. Good news?" "The documents hold. She's filing for emergency regulatory review this morning. It creates a mandatory stay on any board action that could materially affect company control pending investigation." She paused. "It's not a full intervention yet, but it means Hollis can't execute a vote of no confidence on Thursday or at the shareholders' meeting without triggering federal scrutiny. That slows him down. It more than slows him down. It changes the shape of what he can do." She looked up. "He was counting on speed. The whole play was designed to move faster than I could respond. The stay removes that." Liam poured himself coffee from the small hotel machine that made coffee slightly worse than the one at his house. "So what does he do now?" She sat back in her chair. This was the question she'd been working on since 6:15. "He has 2 options," she said. "He accepts that it's over and tries to manage his exposure. Best case for him is some kind of negotiated settlement. He and the CFO give back a portion, someone takes a reduced charge. Unlikely. He doesn't have that kind of character." She tapped the pen against the notepad. "Or he escalates. He looks for a way to make the evidence disappear or become inadmissible before the investigation gets traction." "How does he do that?" "The server files. The original financial records are on Nexus company servers. Marcus got copies out, and I have copies, but the originals are still there. If someone with admin access were to alter or delete those files, the copies become harder to validate. It wouldn't destroy the case, but it would slow Andrea down and give Hollis room to contest the authenticity of what we have." She closed the laptop. "I need someone physically in the server room." "Marcus?" "He doesn't have access. Server room is IT only." She turned the pen over in her fingers. "But Dana does. Her PA credentials include physical access to the executive floor server cage. She handles document retrieval for board meetings." "You want Dana to go into the server room?" "I want her to create a verified external backup, timestamp, chain of custody, the works. If she does it today, before Hollis figures out what Andrea filed this morning, we lock the record." He thought about it. "What's the risk to Dana?" Sophia didn't answer immediately, which told him she'd already thought about it and hadn't arrived somewhere comfortable. If Hollis realizes what she's doing while she's doing it, she becomes a target. If he figures it out afterward, after we've already won, it's a different situation. So the timing matters. The timing is everything. He sat down across from her. Call her. She called her. Dana Chen answered on the first ring, which told him she'd been waiting for it. The conversation was short and specific. Sophia didn't explain more than she had to, and Dana didn't ask for more than she needed. What he heard from Sophia's side was, today, before noon. Yes, everything. Timestamp it twice. Then go home and stay home and don't answer any calls from the building until I tell you it's safe. When she hung up, there was a brief silence. She said, okay? Liam asked. She said already on it, which means she'd been thinking about this herself. Sophia set the phone down. She had the same thought I did. She just needed the authorization. He had a moment of something he recognized as profound respect for people who ran toward problems when they could have looked away. It was a particular kind of courage that didn't announce itself. Okay, he said. What's Thursday? Thursday is the executive briefing Hollis called. He's going to circulate the governance document, the one that frames me as the source of the financial irregularities. Even with the regulatory stay, he can still conduct an internal briefing. He just can't act on a vote. She pressed her fingers flat on the table. But if he gets enough of the executive team behind the narrative, he creates internal momentum. The investigation looks like it's targeting a divided company instead of a clean one. That matters to how the board responds. So you need someone in that room. I need several people in that room who know the truth and can push back. She looked at him. Marcus will be there. Dana's going home, so she's out. I have 2 other executives I think are clean. Head of legal, name is Paul Greer, and the VP of marketing, Sandra Coe. I've been hesitant about Greer because of the access concern, but if I'm careful about what I tell him and when, call them both, Liam said. Not together. Separately, today, different times. Don't tell either of them you've talked to the other. She looked at him. If one of them is compromised, he said, and you've called them both, you've only lost one conversation. If you tell them about each other, you've potentially handed Hollis a full picture of your inside team. He paused. Call Greer first because you need him more. Watch how he responds in the first 30 seconds before he has time to think about it. Sophia was very still for a moment. You've done this before. Not corporate, but this. Counterintelligence training, he said. I was never an intelligence officer. But when you're in a forward operating base trying to figure out if your local interpreter is straight with you, you learn certain patterns. She held his gaze. Same principle. Same principle. She called Paul Greer at 9:42. Liam watched her face in the first 30 seconds of the call. What he saw. A slight forward lean, a fractional release of tension in her jaw. Not what you'd expect from someone receiving bad news about their boss. Something closer to relief. The relief of a person who had been worried alone and was no longer alone. 20 minutes later, she hung up. He's been approached, she said. Hollis came to him 3 weeks ago with a redlined version of the governance document and asked him to review it for legal soundness. Greer told him he'd look at it. She paused. He looked at it, and then he didn't respond to Hollis's follow-up. He's been waiting to see which way this fell. Fence-sitter, Liam said. Not as a criticism, as a fact. He has a family, a mortgage. She said it without judgment. He was protecting himself until he could see which side had the better chance of winning. Now he thinks he can see. Can he? I think so. She picked up the phone again. Sandra Coe next. Sandra Coe was cleaner. No approach from Hollis, no governance document, just a growing unease over the last month that she'd attributed to general organizational tension and hadn't known what to do with. She was in without hesitation. By 11 that morning, Sophia had 4 people inside the company who knew the truth and would be in Thursday's briefing. Marcus, Greer, Coe, and one additional name that Marcus had texted over. The head of investor relations, a man named Terrence Falk, who apparently had been documenting anomalies in the board communication patterns for 6 weeks on his own initiative and had told Marcus 2 days ago that he was this close to going to the press. Tell Terrence not to go to the press, Sophia said when Marcus's text came through. She typed it back. Marcus replied, Already told him. He's unhappy about it, but he'll hold. Liam read over her shoulder. He might be your most useful person in that room. Someone who was independently ready to go public. That's not loyalty to you. That's an independent judgment that something was wrong. Harder to discredit. I know. She set the phone down. I'm running this like a legal case now. Every witness needs to be able to say they arrived at their position independently. He noticed that she'd stopped second-guessing herself somewhere in the last hour. The shift had been gradual. Each call, each confirmation that she'd read the people around her correctly, had added something back that the last 2 weeks had taken away. She was still tired. She still had circles under her eyes, and she was still wearing borrowed clothes, and they were still in a hotel room that cost $64 a night. But she was, unmistakably, the person who had built a billion-dollar company from a shared workspace and a maxed-out credit card. He found he was glad to see it. They drove to a shopping center at noon because Sophia had been in the same borrowed clothes for 3 days, and even the most practical person has a limit. She bought 2 pairs of pants, 3 shirts, and a blazer from a department store with the focused efficiency of someone who had once shopped for companies and found it more straightforward than shopping for herself. She also bought a pair of shoes because the heels she'd been wearing since the mountain road were, she admitted, destroying her feet. Liam bought Mari a stuffed pterodactyl from the toy section because he was walking past it, and it was $8, and he thought she'd like it. Sophia looked at the pterodactyl in the basket. She already has the triceratops, he said defensively. I didn't say anything. You made a face. I made no face. You made the face you make when you're not saying something you're thinking. She looked at him with an expression that suggested he was not wrong, but she wasn't going to confirm it. I was going to say it was sweet, she said finally. That's all. He put the pterodactyl in the basket. They ate lunch in the car in the parking lot because neither of them wanted to go back to the hotel room yet, and neither of them said that. They just didn't suggest going back. Sophia ate a sandwich with the systematic focus she applied to most things, and Liam ate a burrito that was too large but ate the whole thing anyway out of a kind of stubborn principle. Tell me about the company, he said. What it was supposed to be. She looked at him sideways. What it was supposed to be? Or what it became? The first version. What you built in your apartment. She was quiet for a moment, not reluctant, gathering something. It was a coordination platform, she said. That sounds boring, but the idea was, there are so many systems that don't talk to each other. Medical systems, financial systems, logistics, municipal infrastructure. They all run on different protocols, different languages. They were built by different people at different times with no intention of ever connecting. She turned the sandwich wrapper over in her hands. I built a translation layer, software that sat between systems and made them legible to each other. The first application was hospital scheduling. I sold it to 3 hospitals in year 1, and it cut scheduling errors by 31%. That's useful, he said. That's the word I wanted. Not innovative, not disruptive. Useful. She looked out the windshield. Somewhere in the last 3 years, we became a company that talked about disruption more than usefulness. I think that's when things started to go sideways internally, when the language changed. She paused. Hollis accelerated that. He liked the disruption language because it justified the spending patterns he was creating. And you didn't push back? She turned to look at him directly. No, I didn't. I was focused on the product launch and I told myself the cultural shift was growing pains. She said it flatly, without self-pity. That was a mistake. It's mine. He appreciated that. The ownership of it, without drama. You'll fix it, he said. If I still have a company to fix. You will. She looked at him. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She looked back out the windshield. A woman was loading groceries into an SUV 2 spaces down, a toddler on her hip, the specific organized chaos of a parent in a parking lot. Sophia watched her for a moment. How did you know? She asked. When you met Claire? How did you know it was... She stopped, started differently. She sounds like someone worth keeping. He thought about that. About Claire at 24 in a bar he didn't normally go to, talking to her friend about something he didn't catch, and how he'd been across the room thinking, that person is interesting. Not beautiful, not his type, just interesting in a way that made him want to know what she was saying. I wanted to know what she was thinking, he said. About everything. All the time. Even the things that didn't matter. He turned the burrito wrapper in his hands. I've met a lot of people I respected. I've met people I found interesting. The overlap is actually pretty rare. Sophia was quiet. What? He said. Nothing. She gathered her wrapper. We should get back. They drove back to the hotel. Wednesday afternoon turned into Wednesday evening. Sophia was on calls, most of it. Andrea Reyes twice more, Marcus once. A brief and careful conversation with a board member named Elaine Park, who was one of the 3 independent members Marcus had flagged as clean, and who received the summary of what Sophia had with the precise, controlled fury of a 70-year-old woman who had spent 4 decades in business and had very limited patience for men who stole things. She's going to be a problem for Hollis, Sophia said after she hung up. Good problem or bad problem? Good for us. A pause. She wants to attend Thursday's briefing. Observers are technically permitted under the governance structure, and Hollis can't exclude a board member without cause. He'll know something's shifted. Yes. But by then the regulatory stay is filed and public. He already knows the ground is moved. Elaine being there just tells him the board isn't monolithic behind him, which he may not have fully believed until now. Liam looked at the window. It was dark outside, the parking lot lit in orange-yellow, a few cars moving through. He's going to do something, Liam said. Tonight or tomorrow morning, before the briefing. Sophia looked at him. He's been running this for 3 years, Liam said. Patient, careful, long timeline. And now in 48 hours everything has shifted. The regulatory filing, the board member, his inside people getting quiet on him. He's going to feel it. And people who've been patient for a long time, when they feel the thing slipping. He shook his head. They stop being patient. She was very still. What would you do? She asked. In his position. He thought about it without flinching from the answer. I'd go for the thing that makes the evidence complicated. Not destroying it. Too obvious. Too easily traced. I'd go for the people. Find the one person in your network who's the most vulnerable and lean on them hard enough that they recant or disappear. Marcus, she said quietly. Or Dana. But Dana's at home and she used building credentials for the server backup. There's a record, which means it's actually safer for her than Marcus. He paused. Marcus met with you in person. He has the thumb drive copies. He's a current employee with ongoing access. If Hollis can shake him. Sophia picked up the prepaid phone. Marcus answered in 2 rings. I need you to leave your apartment tonight, she said without preamble. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Check into somewhere cash, somewhere you haven't been before. Call me from a new number when you're settled. A pause, listening. I know. I know it feels like an overreaction. It's not. She listened again. Because I know how he thinks. And right now, you're the most exposed. Please. She hung up. Liam was already pulling on his jacket. Where are you going? She asked. To check the perimeter. He said it without drama, the way he'd say, I'm going to check the oil. Stay in the room. Don't open the door for anything you're not expecting. Liam, 20 minutes. He went out. The parking lot was ordinary. He walked the perimeter in a wide loop, checked the sight lines from the road, identified 3 positions where a vehicle could observe the hotel entrance without being visible from the lobby. One of them, a dark sedan parked at the far end of the neighboring strip mall, had fogged windows on a night that wasn't cold enough to fog glass naturally. He didn't approach it. He memorized the plate and kept walking, circled back through the side entrance, came up the stairs. He knocked on the room door with the pattern. Sophia opened it immediately. Sedan at the strip mall next door, he said. Fogged windows. She absorbed this. Same people as before? I don't know. I got the plate. He pulled out his phone and photographed his own handwritten note, then sent the plate number to Marcus with, run this if you can. Don't ask how. Marcus texted back 11 minutes later. Rental? Denver. No known connection, but that means nothing. They stood in the hotel room, both thinking. They're watching, she said. Not moving, just watching. Right now. He looked at the window. That changes when they decide they've run out of time. When is that? When Hollis tells them it's time. He thought about the briefing, 12 hours away. If he's going to do something, it's tonight. After midnight, before the morning. It's the last window before everything becomes official enough that any action creates more liability than benefit. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed. She was not a person who showed fear easily. He'd established that on the mountain road. But what was on her face now wasn't quite fear. It was the look of a person doing a calculation they didn't like the outcome of. "I have to be at that briefing tomorrow," she said. "I know. If I don't show up, Hollis controls the narrative. Even with the stay, even with Elaine there, if I'm absent, he tells the room I fled, that I'm guilty and I'm running." "I know," he said again. "So we can't just sit here and wait." "No." He sat across from her. "We need to move again, not to a new hotel. They're watching this one and they'll pick up any vehicle leaving tonight," he thought. "I need to make a call." He called a man named Dom Ferraro. Dom had been in his unit, second deployment, a staff sergeant from New Jersey who had a talent for logistics that the Army had never properly appreciated and who had, after discharge, channeled that talent into a private security consulting firm based out of the city. They talked maybe twice a year, usually around football season. It wasn't the kind of friendship you maintained. It was the kind that simply existed, like a structural element that didn't need upkeep. Dom picked up on the third ring. "Liam Walker," he said. "It's midnight on a Wednesday. I need a favor." A pause. "Yeah, okay. What kind?" Liam told him the minimum necessary, which with Dom was sufficient. Dom listened without interrupting, which was one of his best qualities. "How many people watching?" Dom asked. "One vehicle confirmed, possibly more I haven't found. And you need to be somewhere at 9 a.m. "Yes." "And the woman needs to be there too." "Yes." Another pause. Longer. Not hesitation. Logistics. "I've got a guy 2 blocks from your hotel. He can be outside in 15 minutes. He drives a white Econoline, completely unremarkable. You two get in the back. He takes you to a place I know. It's a corporate apartment we use for client relocations. It's clean. It's under a business name Hollis will have no path to." Dom paused. "In the morning, I personally drive you to wherever you need to be. I owe you. You owe me a beer and an explanation and a better story than this at some point." Dom said it without heat. 15 minutes. They left through the fire exit at the back of the building, Sophia with her bag and the new blazer still in its bag, Liam with the canvas bag of documents and his jacket and the yellow legal pad he'd been filling for 3 days. They moved fast across the back of the parking lot in the dark, and if the sedan at the strip mall was still there, its angle of view didn't cover the fire exit. The white Econoline was exactly where Dom said it would be. The driver nodded once when they got in, pulled out onto the street at a completely normal speed, and said nothing. Sophia sat in the dim back of the van and said nothing for a minute. Then, "Who is he?" "Old friend. Military." "You have a lot of those." "Enough." She looked at him in the low light. "Do you trust him completely?" "Yes." She nodded, accepted it. The corporate apartment was on the 12th floor of a building in the financial district that was populated almost entirely by companies during the day and was nearly empty at night. It was clean in the way of places that existed for function. Neutral furniture, good lighting, a kitchen with appliances that had never been cooked in. It felt nothing like the hotel room, and it felt nothing like Liam's house on Cotter Street, and that gap between this sterile, functional space and the house with the cracked outlet cover and Mari's dinosaur drawings was something he was aware of in a way he didn't fully examine. Sophia set her bag down and looked out the window at the city, 12 floors up, the light spreading outward in every direction, the particular way a city looks at one in the morning when it's still going, but you can see the seams. "Tomorrow," she said, "whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that I'm not expecting you to be there." He looked at her. "You've done everything," she said, "more than anyone would have. Tomorrow is a board meeting. It's not your fight." "I know it's not my fight." "So you don't—" "Sophia." He said her name the way he said things when he meant them to land. "I drove you off a mountain road in the rain. Somewhere between then and now, it became my fight." He looked at her evenly. "So I'll be there." She held his gaze for a long moment. There was something happening in her expression that she wasn't going to name and he wasn't going to push on. "Okay," she said. "Get some sleep." She turned back to the window. He went to the other room and lay on the bed with his boots still on and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything that needed to happen in 8 hours. It was somewhere around 2 in the morning when the text came in from Marcus. I'm out. At a place off the turnpike. Clean. A pause, then a second message. They came to my apartment at 11:30. Building super said 2 men asking for me. Said I'd moved out. Liam stared at the ceiling. He'd been right. Hollis had made his move tonight. He texted back, "Stay where you are. Don't come in until I call you." Then he lay there and thought about Gerard Hollis, a man he'd never met, who moved money through subsidiary accounts and called intimidation a courtesy, who had spent 3 years patiently dismantling something a 30-year-old woman had built from nothing, and who last night had sent 2 men to knock on a colleague's apartment door at 11:30 to deliver some version of a message. He thought about the kind of person who did that, who looked at $63 million and thought, "This is mine," and looked at the people around them and thought, "These are tools," and looked at a mountain road in the rain and thought, "This is an opportunity." He thought about it for a while. Then he thought about Marisol in Albany, probably asleep under a hotel bedspread with the Triceratops and the new pterodactyl he'd had Rachel pick up when she got on the road. Probably she'd named the pterodactyl already. She named everything within an hour of meeting it. He closed his eyes. Sleep came in pieces, shallow, interruptible. But it came. The alarm went off at 6:30. He was up before it finished its second cycle. Sophia was already in the kitchen when he came out, dressed in the new blazer and pants, coffee made, legal pad open on the counter with fresh notes in the margins. She looked at him and said nothing, but handed him a mug. He drank it standing at the counter. "Marcus is safe," he said. "I know. He texted me too." She looked at her notes. They went to his apartment. "Yes." A silence. Not the comfortable kind this time. The kind that had edges. "He's not going to stop," she said. "Even today. Even with Elaine in the room and the regulatory stay and everything we have, he's not going to accept that it's over." "No," Liam agreed. "So what does that mean for today?" He set his mug down. "It means today isn't the end. It's the turning point." He looked at her. "You go in there and you do what you do. You put the truth in front of people who have the power to act on it. You let Elaine Park be 70 years old and furious." He paused. "And whatever Hollis does next, we deal with it next." She nodded, looked at the legal pad. "I'm scared," she said. Flat, direct, no performance. Just a true statement of her condition. "I know," he said. "That's the right response to this situation. It doesn't make me better at it. It makes you honest about it, which is close." He picked up his mug again. "You ready?" She took a breath, pressed her hands flat against the counter. Something in her face settled, not calm exactly, but resolved. "Yes," she said. Dom was downstairs at 8:15 in a dark blue Suburban suit jacket, expression of a man who had done more complicated things before breakfast and would not be elaborating on any of them. He shook Sophia's hand when Liam introduced them and said, "I've heard nothing about any of this, and I would like to continue to hear nothing after today." "That's the plan," Sophia said. "Good plan." He opened the back door. "Let's go." The Nexus Systems headquarters building was 14 stories of glass and steel in the downtown core, and when they pulled up to the underground entrance at 8:48, Liam looked at it and thought about the woman beside him who had built every floor of it from code she'd written in an apartment and a credit card she'd maxed out twice, and about the man inside it right now who thought he could take it from her. He thought about what the next hour held. "Whatever happens in there," he said, "stay on the facts. Don't let him make it personal." She was looking at the building. "He'll try." "I know. Don't let him." She turned to look at him. Her expression was controlled and clear, and underneath it was something that was afraid and something that was ready, both at the same time, which in his experience was the only honest way to be afraid and ready. "You'll be outside?" she asked. "Right here," he said. She got out of the car and walked into the building. He watched the doors close behind her. Dom in the front seat said nothing for a moment, then, "She know what she's walking into?" "Yes," Liam said. "Good." Dom turned off the engine. "Then we wait." The wait lasted 19 minutes. On the 20th minute, Liam's phone rang. Dana Chen, a number he'd been given but never called. He answered. "Mr. Walker." Her voice was tight and precise. The voice of someone delivering information under pressure. They have Mari. The inside of the Suburban went very quiet. What did you say? Someone took your daughter from the hotel in Albany an hour ago. A pause. They called Sophia's company line. They're saying they'll release her when Sophia withdraws from the building, and publicly, he was already out of the car. Dom was out of the Suburban before Liam reached the sidewalk. Talk to me, Dom said. Liam was already dialing Rachel. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He called again, 4 rings. Voicemail. The 3rd time, she picked up. Liam, her voice was wrong, compressed and tight in a way he'd never heard from her in 32 years of knowing her. Where is she? I don't know. A breath that wasn't steady. We were at breakfast in the hotel restaurant. I went to the bathroom. I was gone maybe 4 minutes. And when I came back, she wasn't at the table. I thought she'd gone to look at the fish tank in the lobby. She'd been talking about it all morning. And then, her voice broke slightly and she pushed through it. And then a man came to our table and put a phone down in front of me and said someone wanted to speak with me. What did they say? That they had Marisol, that she was fine, that she would stay fine as long as Sophia Bennett left her building and made a public statement. A pause. Liam, I'm so sorry. Rachel. He made his voice level by force of will. It is not your fault. Are you safe right now? I'm in the lobby. Hotel security is here. Call the police right now. Tell them everything. Don't leave the hotel. He paused. Did you see the man's face? The one who put the phone down? Yes. Tell that to the police, every detail. Will you do that? Yes. Her voice was steadier now, something to hold on to. I'm coming. He hung up. Dom was already on his own phone, 2 feet away, speaking in the low, flat cadence of a man who was activating something. He held up one finger at Liam, 1 minute, and kept talking. Liam turned and looked at the building entrance. Sophia was on the 14th floor right now, in a room with Hollis and a board member and 6 executives, none of whom knew what was happening on the sidewalk below. He called her prepaid number. She answered in 2 rings, which meant she'd stepped out of the room. They have Mari, he said. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Tell me, she said. He told her everything Rachel had said. Sophia listened without speaking until he finished. The call to the company line, she said. It came through Dana. They wanted me to know it was coordinated, not random, not a mistake. They timed it to when I walked into this building. Yes. Hollis. Has to be. He looked at the pavement. Sophia, I need to go to Albany. Go. That means, I know what it means. Her voice was controlled in a way that cost something. I'll handle what's here. Go get your daughter. The briefing. Liam. A beat. Go. He went. Dom drove. He drove the way men drive when speed matters more than comfort. Smooth through intersections, tight on the curves, making decisions 3 cars ahead. He'd gotten off his phone by the time they pulled onto the interstate, and he said, I've got a contact with the Albany PD, 14-year veteran, straight. I've texted him everything you told me. He'll be at the hotel before we are. How long to Albany? 2 hours 20 in normal traffic. Dom looked at the highway stretching north. Hour 45 right now. Liam sat in the passenger seat and did the thing he'd learned to do in Kandahar, which was to take the fear and put it somewhere it couldn't reach his hands. His hands needed to be calm. His brain needed to be clear. Mari was 6 years old and smart, and she was scared right now, and he was not there, and he put that somewhere too. Not away, not suppressed, just held at a distance where it couldn't make him stupid. He called Rachel again and talked her through what the police would ask and what to say. She was steadier now. She'd always been the sibling who went hard in an emergency and fell apart afterward, which in this moment was exactly what the situation needed. Then he sat and thought. The chess of it. Hollis had made his move, and it was a significant one. Taking a child was a different category of action than corporate fraud or even attempted vehicular homicide on a mountain road. It was the move of a man who had decided that losing was worse than anything, that the exposure from this action was acceptable compared to the exposure from what Sophia had walked into that building carrying, which meant Hollis was afraid. Genuinely, thoroughly afraid. Which meant the evidence was as good as they thought. He texted Marcus. Where are you right now? Marcus replied in under a minute. Still off Turnpike. Why? I need you to go to the building. The briefing. Sophia's there alone. A pause. What happened? Tell you later. Can you go? Already getting in my car. Liam put the phone in his lap and watched the highway. Dom said, You doing okay? No? Good, honest answer. Dom changed lanes smoothly. She's 6, which means she's scared, but she's not going to do anything stupid. Kids that age, they don't know enough to panic strategically. She'll be wherever they put her, waiting. I know. And whoever Hollis hired for this, they're contractors, hired hands. They took the job because it was a job, not because they have something personal. That means they'll follow the instructions they were given and nothing more. He paused. They weren't told to hurt her. They were told to hold her. You don't know that. I know the type of calculation Hollis makes. He's not a violent man. He's a strategic one. Violence is loud. It creates forensic evidence. A man who spent 3 years moving money through subsidiary accounts does not want forensic evidence. He glanced at Liam. She's bait. Bait has to be intact. Liam absorbed this. The logic was sound. The logic being sound didn't make the next hour, 45 minutes, easier. But it gave his brain something true to hold on to instead of the versions of bad outcomes his mind kept trying to generate. He thought about Mari at the breakfast table, talking about the fish tank in the lobby. She would have described the fish in detail. She described everything in detail. Colors, sizes, what they were probably thinking, what they would be called if she were naming them. She was the kind of kid who populated the world with inner lives she'd invented for everything in it. And it was the thing about her that most reminded him of Claire and most broke his heart and most made him fiercely, quietly proud. He was going to get to her. That wasn't hope. That was a statement of intent. They arrived at the hotel in Albany at 10:53. The police were already there. 2 cruisers and an unmarked Dom's contact, a broad-shouldered detective named Haskell who shook hands with the particular efficiency of someone who was managing multiple things at once. Rachel was in the lobby with a female officer, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking from. She stood up when she saw Liam and he crossed the lobby, and she grabbed his arm. I should have... Stop. He held her by both shoulders. Look at me. Stop. She looked at him. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. Tell me exactly what the man looked like, he said. The one who put the phone down. She told him. 40s, medium build, dark jacket, a specific detail about a scar on the left side of his chin that she'd noticed because she'd been a high school art teacher for 11 years, and she noticed faces. She'd already told the police, she said. She'd told them everything. You did good, he said. She had her triceratops, Rachel said. She left it on the table when she went to look at the fish. She wouldn't just leave it. Her voice caught. She never leaves it. He looked at the table across the lobby. The triceratops was still there, sitting on the edge of the table where Mari had left it when she'd gone to look at the fish. Its repaired horn was slightly crooked. He walked over and picked it up and held it. Haskell came to him. We have footage from the lobby camera, Haskell said. Your daughter went to the fish tank at 7:42. At 7:44, a man approached her. She looked up at him. He said something. We don't have audio. And she followed him, willingly. He said something that made her trust him, Liam said. That's what it looks like. Haskell paused. He told her something that made sense to a 6-year-old. Her father sent him probably, or her aunt needed help, something in that register. Liam looked at the fish tank across the lobby. Tropical fish, bright colors, an elaborate coral arrangement on the bottom. He could see exactly what Mari had seen when she'd looked at it. Where are they? We're working on it. The phone they used to contact your sister was a burner, purchased yesterday in Albany. We have the purchase location on camera and we're running the face now. Haskell looked at him steadily. Mr. Walker, I need to ask you something directly. Is there anything about the larger situation, the corporate thing, the people in the city, that would help us narrow the location? Anything you know about how this was organized? Who organized it? Liam looked at him. He thought about the layers. The regulatory filing, the briefing, Sophia in the building, the 11 days that had become one day. Yes, he said. Give me a minute. He called Sophia. She picked up on the first ring. There was background noise, voices, the particular resonance of a large conference room. "Talk fast," she said quietly. "The Albany police need information about Hollis, what he knows about who knows what, logistics. They're trying to narrow the location. Tell them to look at his real estate holdings through the Stamford Leasing Company. He uses it for properties that aren't in his personal name." A brief pause. She was still in the room, still managing whatever was happening. "There's a warehouse property registered to a subsidiary in the Albany area. I saw it in the financial records. It was listed as a storage facility for server equipment, but there's no server equipment. It was a line item I flagged but hadn't followed up on." "Address?" "I don't have the exact address, but Marcus has the full records. He has everything on the thumb drive. Call him." "He's at the building." "I know. Call him anyway." Her voice shifted slightly. Someone in the room was talking to her. "Liam, I have to go back in. The situation here is—" She stopped. "Just find her." She was gone. He called Marcus. Marcus answered while clearly moving. He could hear the background sounds of the building, corridor acoustics, the elevator tone. "I need an address," Liam said. "The Stamford Leasing Company, Albany area, listed as server storage." He heard Marcus set down something, heard the sound of a laptop opening. "Give me 90 seconds. Liam stood in the hotel lobby with the Triceratops in one hand and his phone in the other. The lobby was busy now. Hotel guests unaware of anything, a family checking in near the desk, the ordinary machinery of a Wednesday morning. The fish moved in their tank. Marcus came back in 70 seconds. "Warehouse property, Rensselaer County, registered to Hollis Capital Management through a subsidiary. The address is—" He read it. Liam walked it straight to Haskell. Haskell looked at the address, showed it to his partner, made a call. 3 minutes later, he came back. "We know that building," he said. "It's on our industrial corridor. We had a noise complaint there 2 months ago. Kids, turned out to be nothing, but we ran it, so we have a layout." He was already moving. "Mr. Walker, I need you to stay here." "Detective, I need you to stay here." He said it with the firmness of a man who had been in situations where a parent had not stayed and understood the full spectrum of outcomes from that decision. "If she's there, we will get to her faster without a civilian in the structure. That is not a preference. It is a fact." Liam stood very still for a moment. Dom put a hand on his shoulder. "He's right." Liam knew he was right. He had enough training to know that he was right, and enough experience to know that knowing something was right and accepting it were not always the same thing. He gave Haskell his number and said, "The moment you have her." "The moment," Haskell confirmed. They left. The wait was 31 minutes. Liam sat in a chair near the fish tank because it was where Mari had been, and it was the closest thing to being with her he had right now. Rachel sat beside him. Dom stood near the door with his phone out, running his own parallel information thread with the quiet competence of a man who never fully stopped working. Rachel said at some point, "Tell me about Sophia." "What about her?" "You said her name 5 times in the last hour. Just tell me." He thought about how to answer that honestly. "She's someone who built something real, and someone tried to take it from her, and she's been fighting back since before I met her." He paused. "She's good at it." "And?" "And nothing." Rachel looked at him sideways with the expression she'd been perfecting since she was 12. "Liam." "Rachel. You drove a stranger off a mountain road in the rain and spent a week hiding her from corporate criminals." She kept her voice low. "That is not nothing. It's complicated. Everything worth something is complicated." She paused. "Claire would have liked her, from what you're describing." He didn't answer that. He looked at the fish. At 11:47, his phone rang. Haskell. "We have her," Haskell said. "She's fine. She's asking about a dinosaur." Liam closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "Tell her it's at the hotel," he said. "Tell her I'm coming." He stood up. Rachel made a sound that was not quite a word but contained everything. They drove to the Rensselaer County address in Dom's Suburban. Haskell met them in the parking lot of a low industrial building that looked, from the outside, exactly as unremarkable as it was designed to look. 2 additional cruisers and a crime scene unit van were already there. Marisol was sitting on the back bumper of one of the cruisers, wrapped in a reflective emergency blanket that was 3 times too large for her, and that she wore with the dignity of someone who had decided it was a cape. A female officer sat beside her. Mari was talking. She stopped talking when she saw Liam's face appear around the side of the cruiser. She didn't cry. She'd been holding it together with the stubborn pride of a child who had decided she was not going to cry in front of strangers, and she'd been doing an extremely credible job of it. But when she saw him, she made a sound that was all the things she'd been keeping compressed, and she was off the bumper and across the 10 feet of parking lot before the sound finished. He caught her, lifted her. Her arms went around his neck so tight it pulled at his collar, and he stood there in the parking lot of a Rensselaer County warehouse and held his daughter and breathed. "You came," she said into his shoulder. "Yeah, Bug. The man said you sent him." "I know, I didn't. I figured that out." A pause. "He didn't let me bring the Triceratops." "I have it. It's at the hotel." She pulled back to look at his face with an expression that was checking him for damage, the same way he checked her. Satisfied with what she found, she relaxed against him. "There was another kid here," she said. "A boy, from a different room. He had a tablet. We played a game." He looked at Haskell over her head. Haskell gave a small nod. Yes. Another child? Yes. Safe? Yes. Dealt with. "Were you scared?" Liam asked. She thought about it. "A little, but I remembered what you said." "What did I say?" "That scared is just your brain being careful. You still have to think." He held her tighter for a moment. Dom was on the phone again, and when he turned back, his expression told Liam something had shifted. "The building," Dom said. "Sophia." Liam's head came up. He passed Marisol to Rachel, who took her without question and stepped away. Dom said, "Marcus just called me. He got my number from Sophia." The briefing went sideways. Hollis figured out the regulatory stay this morning, earlier than expected, and he moved the shareholders' meeting up. It's happening right now. What? Emergency session. He convinced enough of the board that a delay was a risk to the company's market position, used the pending SEC investigation as justification for an immediate governance resolution. Dom's voice was steady. "He's calling the vote in the next 20 minutes. Sophia, she's in the room. She has the evidence. But Hollis has procedural control of the meeting, and he's moving faster than anyone anticipated." Dom looked at him. "Marcus says she needs the full documentation package presented directly to the board, not through her, because Hollis has positioned her as a compromised party. She needs an independent voice in that room with the full record." Liam looked at his daughter, wrapped in the emergency blanket, telling Rachel something about the game she'd played with the other kid. He thought about Sophia on the 14th floor with everything she had, facing a man who had just escalated to kidnapping a 6-year-old rather than accept losing. He thought about what independent voice meant. He looked at Dom. "How fast can you get me back to the city?" Dom was already moving toward the Suburban. "Faster than you're comfortable with." Liam went to Rachel. "Take her back to the hotel. Get her the Triceratops. Get her something with sugar in it. Stay with her until I call." Rachel looked at him. "Go," she said simply. He crouched down to Mari's level. She looked at him with those eyes. "I have to go finish something," he said. "The thing with Sophia?" He paused. "Yeah." She nodded with the gravity of a child processing adult information. "Is she okay?" "She will be." "Okay." She reached into the emergency blanket and held out her hand. In it was a small plastic dinosaur. A sauropod, generic, the kind that came in bags of 20 from a dollar store, probably belonging to the boy with the tablet. "For luck," she said. "He said I could have it." He took it, held it in his palm for a second. "Thanks, Bug. Go, Daddy." He went. Dom drove south on the interstate at a speed that was technically inadvisable and practically necessary, and Liam was on the phone for most of it, Marcus giving him a real-time account of what was happening on the 14th floor. The shareholders' meeting had been moved to the main boardroom, where an emergency quorum had been established with the board members Hollis had assembled. Elaine Park was there and was furious, Marcus's word, and had already challenged the procedural legitimacy of the emergency session twice. The two other independent board members had arrived after being reached by phone, skeptical and unsettled. Hollis had distributed the governance document and was controlling the framing, presenting Sophia as a subject of regulatory interest whose continued leadership created liability for the company. Sophia had spoken. She'd presented her evidence, the direct communication between Hollis and the CFO, the edited board minutes, the financial records Marcus had documented. She'd been precise and comprehensive, and Hollis had challenged the provenance of every document, arguing they were forgeries assembled by a desperate executive attempting to deflect legitimate governance concerns. The problem, Marcus said on the phone, is that it's her word against his in that room right now. The SEC filing isn't yet public. Andrea Reyes filed it this morning, but it hasn't propagated through the official channels in a way anyone can independently verify in real time. Without that third-party confirmation, Hollis is successfully muddying the water. How long until the vote? He wants it done in 15 minutes. Elaine has been stalling, but she's running out of procedural objections. I need 10 minutes when I get there. Liam, you're not a company officer. You have no standing to address. I'm a witness, Liam said, to the attempted murder on Route 7, to the phone calls, to the approach on my house, to a kidnapping that happened this morning that is currently being processed by Albany PD and is directly connected to Gerard Hollis's Stamford Leasing Company. He paused. Does a material witness to criminal acts connected to the governance dispute have standing to address the board? A silence on Marcus's end. I'll ask Paul Greer right now, Marcus said. 3 minutes later, Greer says yes. Under extraordinary circumstances, a board chair can recognize a material witness at their discretion. Elaine Park is board chair. Then ask Elaine. Another silence, longer. Then Marcus. She says she'll recognize you. She also says, and I'm quoting here, tell him to be fast and don't waste my time. Tell her I won't. They reached the building at 12:41. Dom pulled up to the underground entrance and Liam was out before the vehicle fully stopped. He went through the lobby fast, took the elevator to 14 and stepped out into a corridor that felt different from the way it had felt that morning. Tighter, charged with the particular tension of rooms where consequential things were being decided. Marcus was waiting by the boardroom door. He looked at Liam, at the warehouse dust still on his jacket, at the look on his face, and said nothing except, "You've got about 2 minutes before Hollis forces the vote." Liam said, "Is she okay?" Marcus understood who he meant. She's holding, but she's been alone in there for an hour. The boardroom had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city and a long table around which sat 14 people. Board members, executives. Hollis at the far end, looking controlled in the way of a man who had decided control was the only expression available to him. Sophia sat to the left of center, the evidence arrayed in front of her, her spine straight and her face composed in her eyes, when they found Liam in the doorway, doing something complicated. Elaine Park, at the head of the table, looked at him with the assessment of a woman who had been in rooms like this for 40 years and could read a person's usefulness in under 5 seconds. "Mr. Walker," she said, "sit down." Hollis looked up. Something moved in his face. Recognition, recalculation, and then a version of contempt that he arranged into professional composure. "This is irregular," he said. "This man has no standing." "I've determined he has standing as a material witness," Elaine said, in a tone that made clear she was not opening this to discussion. "You'll have the opportunity to respond after he speaks." She looked at Liam. "You have 5 minutes. Make them count." Liam sat down. He did not have the yellow legal pad. He did not have notes. He had the documents in the canvas bag he'd been carrying since the hotel, the copies of everything Marcus had given them. And he had a clear sequential memory of every event from a mountain road in the rain to a warehouse parking lot in Rensselaer County an hour ago. He put the canvas bag on the table. "My name is Liam Walker," he said. "I'm not an executive. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a mechanic." He looked around the table. 8 days ago, I found Sophia Bennett on Route 7 with her car against a guardrail. Someone had forced her off the road. I drove her away before the vehicle that forced her could come back. He was direct, factual, no performance. Over the following week, my home was surveilled. I received 2 phone calls threatening my situation and referencing my daughter's school by name and her bus number. He placed the first set of documents on the table and slid them toward the center. This morning, at a hotel in Albany, my 6-year-old daughter was taken from a restaurant by a man working for an organization with a direct financial connection to Gerard Hollis's Stamford leasing company. He slid the second document, Marcus's property record from the thumb drive. She was recovered by Albany PD at a warehouse property registered to that same subsidiary at 10:47 this morning. I left her 40 minutes ago to come here. The room was very quiet. He continued, I'm not here to tell you what the financial records mean. Ms. Bennett has already done that, and she knows her company better than I ever will. He looked at the documents in front of Sophia. I'm here to tell you what I saw, what was done to me. What was done to a 6-year-old girl to stop the woman in this room from walking into this meeting. He looked at Hollis. That's what this is. That's who is asking you for your vote today. Hollis's face had changed. The professional composure was still there in the structure of it, but something underneath had shifted. The small, involuntary signals of a man whose calculation had just been exposed to people who hadn't known what they were approving. These are unverified allegations, Hollis said. His voice was steady. He was good. This man is clearly connected to Ms. Bennett's situation and has every motivation to... The Albany PD case number, Liam said, is in that document. Detective Haskell's direct line is at the bottom. Call him. He looked at Hollis. Call him right now. A silence. Hollis did not reach for his phone. Elaine Park looked down the table at him for a long moment. She had the face of a woman who had made up her mind and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. Paul, she said to Greer, what's the procedure for tabling a vote pending an external criminal investigation directly implicating a party to the governance dispute? Greer, who had been waiting for exactly this question, answered it precisely and at length. The vote did not happen. What happened instead was a series of events that took the rest of the afternoon and had the quality, like all consequential events, of feeling both inevitable and chaotic at the same time. Elaine Park formally requested that Gerard Hollis surrender his board credentials pending investigation. He declined and attempted to leave the room. Marcus Webb and Paul Greer physically blocked the door. Not forcefully, just present, immovable, their combined expressions making clear that leaving was not the option Hollis had thought it was. The police were called by Elaine Park personally, from the boardroom phone, with the clipped authority of a woman who had been waiting to make this call for longer than she knew. Hollis was escorted out of the building at 2:15. The CFO and head of strategy, both of whom had been present in the room and had watched the morning unfold, had lawyers on the phone before they reached the elevators. The shareholders' meeting was rescheduled for the following week, pending the full regulatory review. Andrea Reyes from the SEC called Sophia at 3 o'clock to confirm the formal intervention was in place. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, in the brief gap between one phone call and the next, Sophia found Liam standing at the floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the city, and she stood beside him without saying anything for a moment. She's really okay? Sophia asked. She's really okay. He paused. She gave me a plastic dinosaur for luck. Sophia looked at his hand. He was still holding it. The small sauropod, generic, pale green, no larger than his thumb. She looked at it for a moment. Did it work? She asked. He considered the question. The day had been, by any objective measure, one of the worst of his life. His daughter had been taken from a hotel restaurant. He'd driven at inadvisable speeds across 2 counties. He'd walked into a boardroom with warehouse dust on his jacket and no credentials and 5 minutes to change the direction of a meeting that could end a company. Yeah, he said. I think it did. She reached out and put her hand over his, not taking the dinosaur, just covering his hand with hers for a moment. Her hand was cool from the air conditioning that ran too cold in the boardroom. He didn't move. After a moment, she took her hand back. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Elaine wants you, he said to Sophia. Board member thing. She straightened. Back to it, seamlessly, the way she always went back to it. But before she turned from the window, she looked at Liam once more with an expression he'd seen developing over 8 days. Something that had started as calculation and become something else. Something less careful and more true. Go be with your daughter, she said. I'm going. Liam. She said his name the way she said things when she meant them to land. Thank you. He held her gaze for a moment. You'd have figured it out, he said. The corner of her mouth moved. The kitchen table. And the eggs. She turned and went back into the room. He stood at the window for another moment, looking out at the city, the whole of it, the ordinary and the consequential, all running at once in all directions. And then he put the small green dinosaur in his jacket pocket, alongside the pack of gum he'd bought at a gas station 3 days ago. He went to get his daughter. Rachel drove Marisol back from Albany the following Saturday, and when the car pulled up to Cotter Street, Liam was standing on the front steps with a cup of coffee, and Mari was out of the back seat before the car fully stopped. She hit him at full speed with the Triceratops under one arm and the pterodactyl under the other, both of which she'd named at some point during the week. The Triceratops, she informed him, was named Gerald. The pterodactyl was named Steve. Gerald and Steve, Liam repeated. Gerald is older. Steve is his nephew. She said this with the gravity of established fact. They're scientists. Of course they are. Rachel got out of the car and gave him a long look over the roof, the particular look of a sibling who had lived through something adjacent to a crisis and had questions she was going to ask eventually, just not right now. And then she came around and hugged him, which she didn't do often, and he held on for a moment longer than he'd planned. You okay? She said into his shoulder. Getting there. She pulled back and looked at his face with the searching quality she'd always had, the same quality their mother had, the ability to read the space between what someone said and what they meant. She called, Rachel said quietly. Sophia. She called me on Thursday to say thank you. We talked for 20 minutes. He hadn't known that. She didn't have to do that, he said. No. Rachel picked up her bag from the back seat. She wanted to. A pause. She asked how Mari was doing, not in a polite way, she actually wanted to know way. He looked at his coffee. Liam. Rachel's voice was careful. It's okay if things are complicated. Things are always complicated. I mean, with her specifically. He didn't answer that. Mari appeared between them, demanding to know if she could have pancakes, and the moment passed the way moments did, absorbed into the ordinary, filed somewhere underneath everything else. The days that followed had the quality of aftermath, not the quiet that comes after peace, but the quiet that comes after a storm has moved through, and you're walking the yard checking what held and what didn't. Gerard Hollis was arrested on a Thursday morning, 12 days after the boardroom meeting. The charges were substantial: securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and, added later after the Albany investigation closed its loop, one count of criminal conspiracy in connection with the kidnapping of a minor. His lawyers filed for a dismissal of the last charge on grounds that he had never directly authorized the action against Marisol. The filing was rejected. It turned out that using the phrase "do whatever it takes" in a text message to a contractor sent the night before a 6-year-old was taken from a hotel restaurant was not the legal protection Hollis had apparently believed it to be. The CFO, whose name was Raymond Carr, took a plea agreement within the first week and cooperated fully. The head of corporate strategy held out for 3 weeks and then cooperated less fully but sufficiently. The total amount identified by the SEC investigation came to $67 million, $4 million more than the estimate Marcus had given. The additional 4 had been moved in the final 6 weeks before everything broke, in what the investigators described as a last-ditch acceleration once Hollis had realized Sophia was onto him. All of it was recoverable, or most of it. The legal process was slow and grinding and imperfect, which is how legal processes are, and Sophia would say later that watching it move was like watching a glacier. You knew it was moving, you just couldn't see it moment to moment, but it moved, it arrived where it needed to arrive. The shareholders' meeting happened on a Tuesday, rescheduled and restructured, with Elaine Park presiding and the full independent board present. Sophia addressed the shareholders for 40 minutes. She didn't use notes. She explained what had happened, what it had cost, and what she was going to do differently. She did not minimize her own failures, the cultural drift she'd allowed, the warning signs she'd attributed to growing pains, the 2 years she'd spent looking outward at the product launch while Hollis had been working inward at the company's foundations. She owned it without drowning in it, which was a difficult line to walk in front of several hundred investors, and she walked it well. The vote of confidence passed with 81%. Marcus Webb was named interim chief operating officer the following week. He called Liam to tell him, which Liam thought was unnecessary and also genuinely decent. Liam went back to work on Monday morning. Both jobs, the garage and the warehouse, the Civic that needed a clutch, and the pallets that needed pulling, the fluorescent lights, and Paulson with his lanyard. The ordinary machinery of his life, which had been sitting there the whole time, waiting for him to come back to it. He fixed the blower motor on his truck on a Tuesday evening in the driveway, which he'd been putting off for 3 months. Marisol sat on an overturned bucket beside him and handed him tools when he asked approximately 40 questions about how the motor worked, most of which he answered and a few of which he didn't know the answer to, and said so. She seemed to find this acceptable. At some point she said, without particular lead-up, "Is Sophia coming back?" He kept his eyes on the motor. "I don't know, Bug." "I liked her." "I know. She fixed Gerald's horn, and she didn't talk to me like I was little." He reached for the socket wrench. "How do you mean?" "Some adults ask you questions, but they're not actually listening to the answer. They're just doing the asking part." Mari turned the flashlight so it pointed better at where he was working. She was doing the listening part. He thought about that. About Sophia at his kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, listening to a 6-year-old explain ceratopsian dietary habits while she held a tube of super glue over a broken horn. The focused quality of her attention. The way she never performed interest. Either she was interested or she wasn't, and when she was, it was complete. "Yeah," he said. "She's like that." He finished the blower motor and started the truck, and the heater came on without its usual groan. Just warm air, immediate and steady, and Mari said, "You fixed it!" with a volume that was entirely disproportionate to the achievement and entirely appropriate to her age. And he laughed, which was the first time he'd laughed, really laughed, the unguarded kind, in about 2 weeks. He thought about that later, about the laugh, about the fact that it had taken until a working blower motor and a 6-year-old's enthusiasm to get there. He'd been carrying something since the mountain road, not just the events of it, not just the risk and the tension and the 12-hour drives and the boardroom with warehouse dust on his jacket. Something more diffuse than that, a shift in the landscape of his ordinary life that he couldn't quite name and couldn't quite put back. He knew what it was, more or less. He just hadn't decided what to do about it. Sophia called him on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the boardroom. He was making dinner, actual dinner, pasta from scratch, because Mari had asked, and because cooking from scratch was the kind of task that required enough attention to keep your brain from circling. And his phone buzzed on the counter, and her name was there. He turned the heat down and picked it up. "Hey," he said. "Hey." A pause. "Is this a bad time?" "I'm making pasta. It can wait." He leaned against the counter. "How are you?" "Tired." She said it simply, without dressing it up. The good kind of tired. The kind where you're tired because you've been doing things rather than tired because things have been happening to you. "I know the difference." "I thought you would." Another pause, shorter. "I wanted to call sooner. There was always something that needed to happen first. Something that needed handling." "You were busy saving your company." "I was." A beat. "It's not entirely saved yet. I have 18 months of work ahead of me, at minimum. Rebuilding trust with the board, with investors, with the employees who watch their executive team either commit fraud or stay silent about it." She exhaled. "There are days when the scale of it is—" She stopped. "Clarifying?" he offered. A short laugh. Not the caught-off-guard one from the Thai restaurant. Something slightly different. Warmer, maybe. "Yes, that's the right word." He stirred the pasta. "Is the company going to be okay?" "Yes." No hesitation. "It's going to be different than it would have been. Some things are going to have to change that I'd have preferred to change on my own timeline, but it's going to be okay." A pause. "The product, the actual thing, the translation layer, the usefulness of it, none of that was touched. The corruption was in the structure, not in the work, and the work is still good. That's what matters." "I've been reminding myself of that." She was quiet for a moment. He heard something in the background by stun. City sounds, the suggestion of height. A window opened somewhere. She was probably at the office, or at the apartment he'd never seen, the one above the city that he'd only heard referenced once in passing. "I'm coming back through your area next week," she said. "There's a meeting in Hartford on Wednesday. I'd be driving past." He stopped stirring. "You'd be driving past," he repeated. "I mean, I would. That's a factual statement." Her voice had the careful quality she used when she was saying something that mattered, and was trying not to make it sound like it mattered more than she wanted to admit. "I thought, if it wasn't inconvenient, I could stop. See Mari, see you." A pause. "If that's... come for dinner," he said. A beat. "Okay," she said. "What should I bring?" "Nothing, just yourself." "I can bring wine." "I don't drink wine." "I know, it would be for me." He could hear the smile in it, the same shape as the one she'd had at the Thai restaurant, the one that changed the whole structure of her face. "Then bring wine," he said. She came on a Wednesday. She drove herself. No driver, a rental car, which she parked on Cotter Street behind his truck, and got out of in dark jeans and a plain shirt, no blazer, carrying a bottle of wine and a flat rectangular package in brown paper that she gave to Mari before she even said hello to Liam. Mari looked at the package. "What is it?" "Open it." Mari opened it with the efficient destruction that children bring to wrapping paper and stopped when she saw what was inside. It was a book. Large format, full color, the kind that weighed something, about ceratopsian dinosaurs. Not a children's book with cartoon illustrations. A proper field guide, the kind with anatomical diagrams and fossil records and Latin classifications. Mari looked at Sophia with an expression that Liam recognized as his daughter's version of profound respect. "This is a real scientist book," she said. "You're a real scientist," Sophia said. Mari looked at the book for another moment, then she looked up. "Gerald and Steve are in here," she said. It was not a question. Pages 47 and 82. Mari looked at her with the expression she reserved for people who had exceeded her expectations. Then she went to the couch and opened to page 47 and did not look up for the next 40 minutes. Sophia stood in the doorway of the living room and watched her for a moment. Then she came into the kitchen, where Liam was at the stove. "She's incredible," Sophia said. "She is." He handed her the corkscrew. "She gets it from her mother." Sophia worked the cork. "She gets some of it from you." "The stubbornness, maybe." "The stubbornness," she agreed, "and the part where she actually listens." He turned to look at her. She was opening the wine with the focused competence she brought to everything, and she didn't look up immediately, and he had a moment to just look at her, at the way she stood in his kitchen in her plain shirt and her dark jeans, at the absence of the CEO posture, the armor she wore in boardrooms and at shareholders' meetings, the version of herself that was built for survival in rooms where people wanted things from her. None of that was present right now. She was just a person in a kitchen, opening wine. He thought about what it had taken to get here. 8 days on a mountain road in the rain, and in hotel rooms, and in a warehouse parking lot in Rensselaer County, and in a boardroom on the 14th floor. All the ways something could have gone differently, earlier or later or worse, and this ordinary Wednesday evening in his house might never have happened. "What?" she said, looking up. "Nothing," he said. "Just watching you open wine." She gave him the look she gave when she thought he was deflecting, which was accurate. "Liam." "Sophia." She set the wine down. "I want to say something." "You always want to say something. And you always make it difficult." She looked at him directly. "I've been thinking about the last month, about all of it, and I keep coming back to the same thing." He waited. "I've spent 7 years building something," she said, "and I built it by being armored, careful. I didn't let things in that didn't have a clear purpose. People, situations, complications. I was very efficient about it." She turned the wine glass by its stem. "And then I ended up on the side of a mountain road in the rain, and a man in a beat-up truck stopped, and nothing about him had a clear purpose. No agenda, no angle, no reason to help, except that he couldn't keep going past someone who needed help." She paused. "And it turned out that the thing I'd been most efficient at excluding was the thing I'd needed most." The kitchen was quiet. Mari had found something in the book that she wanted to tell Gerald and Steve about, and her voice carried softly from the living room, explaining things to stuffed animals. "I'm not good at this," Sophia said. Her voice was still controlled, still precise, but underneath it something was exposed that she was allowing to be exposed, which was different from it happening accidentally. I've been through relationships before. They've ended badly, mostly because I wasn't present for them, because the company was always the first priority. She looked at him. "I'm not promising I've fixed that. I don't think I'd believe myself if I tried." "I'm not asking you to promise anything," he said. "I know, that's part of—" She stopped, tried again. Most people who've been through what you've been through, losing Claire, raising Mari alone, the jobs, the financial pressure, most people come out of that with walls. Understandably. Reasonably. She held his gaze. You don't have walls, you have judgment, which is different. Walls keep everything out. Judgment decides what gets through. She paused. You decided I got through. On a mountain road in the rain before you knew anything about me. And you kept deciding it every day after that. He was quiet for a moment. In the living room, Mari had apparently found Steve's entry in the book and was now explaining to Steve what he actually looked like, which Steve apparently had opinions about. I kept deciding it, he said, because it kept being the right decision. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. Okay, what? Okay, I just needed to say all of that. And hear that. She picked up her wine glass. And now I would like to have dinner in your kitchen and not be a CEO in crisis for approximately 2 hours. That I can do, he said. He turned back to the stove. She stood beside him, not helping but present, and they talked about nothing consequential. About the pasta, about a movie Mari had apparently told her about on the phone last week that involved robots and was, according to Mari, the greatest film ever created, about the drive from the city and the Hartford meeting and whether Hartford had any good food. They talked like people who had been through something together and come out the other side and were now, carefully, learning the ordinary. Dinner was imperfect in the ways that real dinners are. The pasta was slightly overcooked because the conversation had held him at the counter 2 minutes longer than it should have. And Mari knocked over her juice at some point, and it went across the table, and Sophia caught her own wine glass by reflex with a speed that made Mari look at her with open admiration, and they cleaned it up, and it was fine. Sophia ate the pasta with the same focused appreciation she'd brought to every meal he'd seen her eat, which told him something about how she'd been feeding herself before all of this. On schedule, on purpose, probably at a desk. After dinner, Mari wanted to show Sophia the rest of Gerald and Steve's collection, which were arrayed on the shelf in her room by era, which she explained in considerable detail. Sophia listened with the listening quality that Mari had identified and Liam had confirmed. Complete, unperformed, genuinely interested. She asked the right questions. Not condescending questions that adults ask children to seem engaged. Actual questions, the kind that showed she'd heard what was said. Liam stood in the doorway and watched. He thought about what it meant to build a family, not the legal definition, not the biological one. The actual thing, the practice of it, the daily choice of it, the way it was assembled not from blood or paperwork, but from the decision, repeated every morning, to show up for the same people you showed up for yesterday. He'd built that once, with Claire, and it had been taken from him in a way that had no logic and no fair distribution, and left a shape in his life that he'd learned to live around. He'd built a version of it with Marisol, the two of them learning each other as she grew and he improvised, and they both made mistakes and kept going. And he'd thought for a long time that this was the shape his life had found. The two of them, the two jobs, the cracked outlet cover, and the blower motor that needed fixing, and the cereal that ran out on school mornings. He hadn't been wrong to think that. It had been enough. It had been, some mornings, more than enough. But watching Sophia sit on the edge of Marisol's bed with the dinosaur book open across both their laps, the two of them arguing amiably about whether Steve looked more like a Type A or Type B pterodactyl variant based on the wingspan diagram, he understood that enough and all of it were different categories, and he'd been confusing them. He put Mari to bed at 8:30. The full routine, teeth, pajamas, the specific arrangement of Gerald and Steve on either side of her pillow, that had been established and was non-negotiable. The 2 books she wanted read, and the 3rd she lobbied for and didn't get. The glass of water that she asked for after the lights were out, and that he brought because it was a reasonable request, and also because he'd learned that this was the moment she said the things she'd been carrying all day. Tonight what she said was, "I think Sophia should come to my school thing." "What school thing?" "The science fair. It's in 2 months." A pause. "Because she's a scientist." "She's a technology executive." "Technology is science." She said it with the finality of someone ending a debate. "And she knows about dinosaurs." "I'll ask her," he said. "Ask her tonight, before she leaves." "I'll ask her tonight." He turned the light off and sat in the dark on the edge of her bed for a moment, listening to her breathing settle. He thought about Claire. He did this less often now than he had. In the first year, he'd done it constantly. In the second year, it had been like a recurring injury, something that ambushed him when he wasn't braced for it. Now it was quieter, more like looking at a photograph, present, real, not without weight, but not the same as the wound. Claire would have had opinions about all of this. She'd always had opinions about everything, which was one of the things he'd loved and one of the things that had driven him to distraction, which was how it worked with people who mattered. She would have had opinions about Sophia, specific, well-reasoned, slightly inconvenient opinions that she'd have delivered while doing something else, like grading papers or making coffee, in the offhand way she had of dropping important things into the middle of ordinary moments. He thought she would have said, "She's worth it. Don't make her wait while you figure out if she's worth it." He sat with that for a moment. Then he stood up and went back to the living room. Sophia was on the couch, shoes off, her legs tucked under her, reading something on her phone with the half attention of someone winding down. She looked up when he came in. "Asleep?" "In about 10 minutes. She fights it." "She fights everything," Sophia said, without criticism. "She gets that from you. Everybody keeps saying that, because it keeps being true." She set the phone down. "She wants me at the science fair." "She told you?" "She told me at dinner, and then I think she told you just now as a backup strategy." A pause. "It's in 2 months." "I know. That's 2 months from now, things will be—" She stopped. "My life is going to look different in 2 months. The restructuring, the new hires, the board review. I can't predict my calendar 2 months from now." "I know," he said, "but I want to be there." He sat down across from her, not on the same couch. Across, in the armchair that had been his mother's, which still held the specific comfort of furniture that had been broken in by someone who sat the same way you did. "Then be there," he said. She looked at him. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. It's not easy." He looked at her. Simple and easy aren't the same thing. She turned her wine glass again, that habitual motion. He'd learned it meant she was thinking, not stalling. "I'm going to keep being bad at this in specific ways," she said. "I'm going to disappear into work without meaning to. I'm going to forget to communicate something I assumed was obvious. I'm going to optimize when I should just be present." She said it with the specificity of self-knowledge, not apology. "I know those things about myself." "I know things about myself too," he said. "I shut down when I should talk. I hold on to things longer than I should. I make decisions alone because it's faster, and then I've made them before the other person knew there was a decision to make." She looked at him. Something in her expression was measuring the honesty of what he'd just said, which he'd known it would do, which was why he'd said it that way. "We'd be bad at this in compatible ways," she said. "Maybe. Or we'd make it worse. Maybe that too." She was quiet for a moment. Outside, Cotter Street was doing its ordinary evening things. A car passing, someone's porch light going on, the faint sound of a television 2 houses down. "I've been in this city my whole career," she said. "I have an apartment I sleep in, but it's not a home. It's a place I keep my clothes." She paused. "I don't know what a home feels like anymore. I'm not sure I've known since I was a kid." He thought about that. About his house with the cracked outlet cover and the thrift store couch, and Mari's drawings on the walls, and the blower motor he'd finally fixed, and the kitchen table where Sophia had sat at 11 o'clock at night, drinking coffee and listening to a 6-year-old explain science. "It feels like this," he said, "more or less." She looked around the room, really looked, the way she looked at things when she was reading them rather than just seeing them. The mismatched furniture and the dinosaur drawings, and the lamp with the slightly crooked shade, and the stack of Mari's library books on the floor by the couch. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know." She left at 10:30. She had a 6:30 drive to Hartford the next morning, and she said this without apology, which he appreciated. She didn't perform reluctance to leave. She just said the practical fact of it. He walked her to her car. The street was quiet. The neighbor 2 doors down had a jack-o'-lantern on the porch, left over from a week ago, sagging slightly on one side in the way of pumpkins that had been sitting in the October air for too long. "I'll call when I'm back from Hartford," she said. "Okay." "And She stopped. Then, "I want to do this. I want to try." He looked at her in the streetlight, in the cold October air with her wine and her keys and her plain shirt and no armor anywhere on her. "Me too," he said. She held his gaze for a moment, then she reached out and put her hand briefly against his jaw. Not a kiss, not quite, something between a gesture and a decision. And then she got in the car. He stood on the sidewalk and watched the rental car pull out and turn the corner. The street was quiet after. His own breath clouded slightly in the cold. The jack-o'-lantern sagged on the neighbor's porch, the ordinary machinery of Cotter Street, running as it always ran. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he went inside. The house had the specific quiet of a house with a sleeping child in it, not empty, just held. He turned off the lights in the kitchen and checked the lock on the back door and looked in on Mari, who was on her back with Gerald under one arm and Steve on the pillow beside her, and the Ceratopsian field guide wedged against the wall where she'd apparently been reading it after he turned the lights out. He picked it up and set it on her shelf and pulled her blanket up. He stood in her doorway for a moment. He thought about what a person could lose and still go on. He'd learned that in the hardest classroom available. He thought about what it meant to go on, not to recover, not to return to what you'd been, but to go forward, into a different shape of things, carrying what mattered and learning what you didn't know you needed yet. He'd been a mechanic long enough to know that the same failure that destroyed one machine could, in a different machine, be the thing that revealed a better way to build it. Damage wasn't always destruction. Sometimes it was information. He'd been damaged. He'd taken the information. He'd built something from the 2 jobs and the thrift store couch and the dinosaur drawings and the cracked outlet cover. A life that was small in square footage and not small in anything that actually mattered. And into that life, a rainy night on Route 7 had delivered a woman who'd built something of her own and had it almost taken from her and had fought like hell to keep it, and who sat on his daughter's bed and argued about pterodactyl variants with the genuine attention of someone learning a new language she hadn't known she wanted. Nothing about this was the plan. None of it had followed the logic he'd mapped out for himself after Claire, the quiet life, the 2 jobs, the kitchen table, and the cereal, and the blower motor, and nothing that required more of him than he could give. It turned out he had more to give than he'd thought. He went to bed at 11, lay on his back in the dark with the window cracked the way he always slept, the cold air coming in thin and clean. He thought about the night on the mountain, the headlights picking up the crumpled guardrail, the woman in the driver's seat with sharp eyes, and the wrong kind of fear. The choice that had taken approximately 3 seconds and had unraveled into everything that followed. He'd made that choice because he couldn't keep going past someone who needed help. That was the whole of it. No calculation, no agenda, no reason except the one he'd given Sophia herself, because stopping was simply who he was. He'd never thought of that as a significant quality. It had seemed obvious to him. You stopped, because the alternative was to keep driving, and there was no version of himself that kept driving. He'd been mildly surprised, over the course of the last month, to discover how many people considered it notable. Dom had said something about it, obliquely. Elaine Park had said something more directly. Marcus had said it in the warehouse parking lot and meant it. He thought about what it said about the world that stopping for someone in need was considered remarkable rather than basic. He thought about Marisol, who would grow up knowing he'd stopped, who would carry that as her baseline for what people did. They stopped, they helped, they didn't calculate the cost before deciding whether someone was worth assistance. She'd expect that of people. She'd probably be disappointed by the world's delivery on that expectation sometimes, but she'd hold it anyway, the way children held things they'd been given early, stubbornly, past evidence, past reason. He hoped she'd hold it. He thought about Sophia, about who she'd been on that mountain road, frightened, disciplined, precise, alone, and who she'd been in the boardroom, and who she'd been on his daughter's bed arguing about pterodactyls, and who she'd been on the sidewalk tonight with her hand briefly against his jaw and a decision forming in her expression. All the same person. All the complicated, imperfect, relentlessly capable version of a woman who'd built something from nothing and fought to keep it with every tool she had, and was now, carefully, learning to include things that weren't tools. There were no guarantees in any of this. He knew that better than most people. He knew exactly what it looked like when the thing you'd built and trusted and staked your life on was simply taken, through no fault of your own, by the random machinery of the world. He knew the shape of that absence. He'd learned to live in it. He also knew that you could know all of that, carry all of that, and still open the door, still stop on the mountain road, still make room at the kitchen table, still say come for dinner, and me too, and mean both of them completely. That was not naivety. It was something harder. He'd learned it the way he'd learned most things, by doing it when it was required of him, before he'd fully decided to, and finding out afterward that he was capable of it. He closed his eyes. The last thing he thought before he slept was not about the company or the boardroom or the charges pending against Gerard Hollis, or the 18 months of work Sophia had ahead of her, or the blower motor, or the bills, or any of the weight that was still real and still present and still his. The last thing he thought was his daughter on the front steps that morning, hitting him at full speed with a triceratops named Gerald and a pterodactyl named Steve, both of whom were scientists. He slept. The science fair happened on a Thursday in December in the gymnasium of Crestview Elementary, which smelled like floor wax and construction paper and the particular combination of organized chaos that comes from 61st graders presenting their research to anyone who would stand still long enough to hear it. Marisol's project was about how dinosaur fossils were found and what they told scientists about animals that no one had ever seen alive. She'd built a diorama. She'd written a report, 4 pages, illustrated, with labeled diagrams. She'd practiced her presentation on Gerald and Steve for 3 weeks, which had driven Liam mildly to distraction and which had produced the most polished 6-year-old research presentation he'd ever witnessed, which admittedly was a small sample size. Sophia came directly from the city. She arrived 5 minutes before the fair started, slightly out of breath, still in work clothes but with her jacket off, and she went straight to Marisol's table. Mari looked up and her face did what faces do when they see someone they didn't fully believe would come until they came. "You're here," she said. "I said I would be," Sophia said. Mari gave this the nod it deserved, which was a significant one. Then she turned to her diorama and began her presentation with the gravity of a professional. Liam stood at the edge of the table and listened. He'd heard this presentation 16 times. He knew every line of it. He listened to every line of it. Afterward, a teacher he didn't recognize came to Sophia and said, "Are you a scientist?" And Sophia said, "Sort of." And the teacher said, She told us you were." And Sophia looked at Marisol, who was already explaining something to another child about the diorama and didn't notice. And something in Sophia's expression did the thing it did when she was moved and didn't want to perform being moved, the thing that showed up anyway. They walked out of the gymnasium together into the cold December air, the 3 of them, and Mari walked between them in the specific way children walked between 2 adults who both belonged to them, close to both, touching neither, exactly in the middle. Liam looked at the parking lot, at the ordinary suburban evening, the minivans and the Christmas lights on the school fence and the other parents with their children. He felt standing there the particular weight of a life that had been through something and come out still going. Not unaltered, not unmarked, but going. Sophia reached out and found his hand. Not dramatically, sideways, incidentally, the way you reach for something you've decided to reach for and aren't making a production of. He closed his hand around hers. Mari looked up at both of them with the expression she'd had her whole life, the one that was older than she was, the one that saw things clearly and usually didn't say what it saw until the right moment. "Can we get pizza?" she said. "Yes," Liam said. "Can Gerald and Steve come?" "They're in the car." "Okay." She started toward the parking lot. Sophia, Steve is on page 82. Did you know they think Steve's species could fly over the ocean? I read that, Sophia said. What do you think? I think Steve specifically probably couldn't, because he has a personality that seems more like a short flight type. She considered this gravely. But his species in general, yes. Sophia looked at Liam over Mari's head. The look that passed between them contained several things that didn't need to be said. The mountain road, and the kitchen table, and the boardroom, and the warehouse parking lot, and a hand against a jaw in the cold street, and all the small and large decisions that had added up to this parking lot, this evening, this child walking ahead of them toward a car with 2 stuffed dinosaurs in the back seat. He didn't say any of it. Neither did she. Some things didn't need saying. They were just true, the way true things were, present and quiet and solid under everything, not requiring proof, not asking for anything except to be carried forward into whatever came next. They walked to the car together.